Good evening, listeners. Welcome to Noir Intellect. I'm your host, Victor Blackwood. If you enjoy mysteries, hidden clues, and uncovering the truth, don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Leave it in the comments below. Now, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp. The mystery begins now. Chapter 1. The umbrella by the cellar door rain in New York is democratic. It falls on penthouses, pushcarts, policemen, and people who have just paid too much for new shoes. By the sixth wet day, the gutters of West 35th Street were talking loudly. The taxis looked like yellow fish, and even the pigeons had lost their confidence. Nero Wolfe approved of none of it, though the weather had made no direct attack upon him. He had not stepped outside the brownstone in 10 days, and he saw no reason to begin merely because the sky had become unreasonable. At 9:15 on Thursday morning, I was in the kitchen with Fritz Brenner, eating eggs with smoked ham, while Wolfe consumed enough food to support a small committee. The rain struck the windows above the sink, and Fritz was explaining why wet weather ruined the judgment of fish sellers. The doorbell rang. "No sensible visitor comes before 10, Wolfe said. He lifted a piece of toast and examined it. "Perhaps he has come to apologize," I said. "Then he may wait." The bell rang again. I left the kitchen and went to the front door. On the stoop stood a man in a brown raincoat that had failed completely at its assignment. Water ran from the brim of his hat, his shoes were black with mud, and his face had the pale, pinched look of a man who had recently met something he could not explain. He was around 50, thin but strong, with rough hands and a grey mustache. "Mr. Wolfe?" he asked. "Mr. Wolfe is eating. That places you behind eggs, ham, toast, and possibly coffee. My name is Harold Kent. I am superintendent at the Hawthorne residence." "That sounds responsible. I need to speak with him." "About what?" He looked over his shoulder at the rain. "An umbrella." I gave him another examination. "Is it attacking the tenants?" "No." "Has it stolen anything?" "No." "Then you have chosen an expensive way to avoid an umbrella stand." He removed his hat. "A man is dead." That changed the price of admission. I took his coat and led him to the office. He sat on the edge of the red leather chair while I returned to the kitchen. Wolfe had moved from toast to coffee. "Harold Kent," I said, "superintendent of the Hawthorne residence. He wants to discuss an umbrella and a dead man." Wolfe set down his cup. "In that order." That was his order. "Who is dead?" "He has not said." Wolfe looked at the clock. His breakfast schedule had 11 minutes remaining. "Tell him to wait." Kent waited. He did it badly, shifting his feet, rubbing his hands, and looking at the office door every time the house made a sound. At 9:40, Wolfe entered and crossed to his desk. He wore a brown suit, a pale yellow shirt, and an expression suggesting that the visitor had been granted a favor too large to understand. "Mr. Kent," I said, "this is Nero Wolfe." Kent stood. Wolfe lowered himself into his custom-made chair. "Sit. Mr. Goodwin says a dead man follows an umbrella." "Explain." Kent sat again. "The umbrella appeared behind the Hawthorne residence early Tuesday morning. It was standing beside the cellar door." "Whose umbrella?" "Nobody's." Wolfe frowned. "All objects belong to someone, even when ownership is disputed. I asked every tenant and every member of the staff. Nobody claimed it. Then discard it. I was going to, but it was dry." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. "Describe the weather." "It had rained all night, hard. The yard was flooded near the drain. The cellar steps were wet, and water was running off the roof. But the umbrella was dry. The cloth, handle, and metal tip were all dry."
"Was the cellar door sheltered?"
"Only by a narrow stone ledge. Rain blows under it. Anything standing there for more than a few minutes would have been soaked." "When did you last see the area without the umbrella?" "Monday night at 11. I checked the cellar door before going to bed. It was locked, and nothing was beside it." "When was the umbrella found?" "Tuesday at 5:40 in the morning. The furnace man saw it." "Name?" "Samuel Pike." "Did he touch it?" "He carried it into my office." Wolfe made a noise in his throat. "He disapproves of evidence being handled before it has had the courtesy to introduce itself," Kent continued. "It is a black umbrella, good quality, with a curved wooden handle, no initials, no maker's name, no mud on the tip. It looked as though someone had taken it from a cupboard and placed it there. Was the cellar door still locked? Yes. Any marks? A fresh scratch near the lower hinge. I thought it came from a delivery box. What is stored in the cellar? Coal, tools, cleaning supplies, old furniture and heating equipment. There is also a passage leading to the next property. Wolfe's finger stopped moving on the arm of his chair. What property? A townhouse owned by Richard Lawson. Kent swallowed. He is the dead man. I moved from my desk to the chair at the right of Wolfe's desk. Wolfe asked, when did he die? He was found this morning in his study. His housekeeper went in with his breakfast. The doctor first said it was his heart. First, the police found something in the water glass. Inspector Kramer is there now. How do you know, Mr. Kramer questioned me about the cellar passage. He asked about the umbrella. I told him everything. He said it was probably nothing. Then why are you here? Kent looked at me, then at Wolfe. Because it is not nothing. Wolfe leaned back. Why? Someone tried that cellar door 3 months ago. That did it. Wolfe's eyes opened another fraction. Kent explained that the Hawthorne residence occupied an old 12-story building on East 67th Street. The Lawson townhouse stood directly behind it, separated by a narrow service yard. The two cellars had once belonged to a single mansion. A brick passage still connected them, though a heavy door divided the properties. 3 months earlier, Kent had found the connecting door partly open. He had assumed a workman had failed to secure it. Lawson's caretaker denied using the passage. Kent replaced the lock. A month later, Kent said, someone tried it again. The new lock was scratched. Did you report that? I asked. To Mrs. Calder, the building manager. She told me to secure it and avoid alarming the tenants. Wolfe said, who knew of the passage? Employees. A few long-time tenants. Mr. Lawson knew. His housekeeper too. Could the door be opened from Lawson's side? Yes, if someone had the key to his lock. There are separate locks at each end. Then the umbrella may have marked the Hawthorne entrance. That is what I thought. Only after Lawson died. Kent lowered his eyes. Yes. Wolfe regarded him for 5 seconds. You have delayed 3 months before seeking help and arrived only after the police became interested. Why? I was afraid of losing my position. That remains possible. Yes, the telephone rang, I answered. Archie, Kramer said, is Harold Kent there? I looked at Kent. He has arrived, dried, and confessed to owning a name. Keep him there. Why? Because I said so. That is a reason suitable for a dog. Goodwin, what happened to Lawson? Put Wolfe on. I handed over the receiver. Wolfe listened, grunted twice, and said, no, I will not come. Send the relevant facts with Mr. Goodwin. He hung up. What relevant facts? I asked. You are going to the Lawson townhouse. I was afraid of that. You have endured weather before. Not willingly. He turned to Kent. Where is the umbrella? In my office at the Hawthorne. Has anyone handled it since Tuesday? Samuel Pike, me and 2 police officers. Mr. Goodwin will examine it. You will accompany him. Kent stood. Will you take the case? There is no client. Mr. Lawson's nephew might hire you. Then his nephew may learn the use of a telephone. Wolfe glanced at me. Archie, inspect the umbrella, both cellar doors and the passage. Learn who entered Lawson's house during the past week. Determine whether his death and the umbrella occurred on the same timetable. Anything else? Yes. Do not bring the umbrella here until it has been examined for poison. You think the umbrella killed him. I think an object carefully kept dry during a storm was not abandoned. It was positioned for a purpose. 20 minutes later, Kent and I were in a taxi crawling uptown through rain that had ambitions to become a river. The Hawthorne residence had a limestone front, a brass canopy, and a doorman whose uniform appeared to have been ironed while he was wearing it. Kent led me through the lobby, past a row of elevators, and down a service hall to his office. The umbrella lay across a wooden table. It was black, expensive, and completely dry. The cloth showed no water stains. The polished wooden handle had been wiped clean. The metal tip had no pavement scratches except one narrow mark near the end. A thin band of dull grey material clung inside the curve of the handle. I did not touch it. Was that there before? I asked. Kent bent closer. I didn't notice. I used tweezers from my pocket kit and lifted the grey strip into an envelope. It looked like dried sealing compound. The umbrella shaft had a silver collar below the handle. I turned it with gloved fingers. It moved slightly. Has anyone opened this? It is an umbrella. That does not answer the question. I twisted the collar. The handle loosened from the shaft. Inside was a narrow hollow space. It was empty. Kent stared. I never knew that was there. Neither did the person who made umbrellas respectable. The compartment could have held a thin vial, a key, or a rolled paper. The grey compound had sealed the joint, so rain could not enter. Whoever had used it had removed the contents and replaced the handle. We went through the rear service door into the yard. Rain struck the paving stones hard enough to bounce. The cellar entrance stood beneath a ledge, no wider than my hand. No umbrella left there overnight could have remained dry. The lower hinge carried a fresh scratch, bright against the dark metal. The lock showed marks around the keyhole, but no sign of being forced. Kent opened it. Stone steps descended into a cellar smelling of coal dust, damp brick and old pipes. We crossed between storage bins to a short passage. At the far end stood another heavy door. This leads to Lawson's cellar, Kent said. The lock on our side was intact. The floor in front of it had been swept recently, but along the wall lay a small crescent of dried mud. I crouched. The mud was pale brown, not black like the soil in the hawthorn yard. Pressed into it was the edge of a narrow heel. Who sweeps here? Samuel Pike. When? Every Monday. So someone passed after Monday morning. I examined the door. Near the bottom was another streak of grey sealing compound, matching the material from the umbrella handle. The umbrella had not merely stood beside the entrance. It had been used in the passage. We crossed to the Lawson townhouse by the street. A patrolman admitted us after telephoning Kramer, who met us in the entrance hall with an unlit cigar and a face arranged for complaint. You took your time. The rain refused to move aside. Kramer looked at Kent. Sit in the kitchen. Do not leave. Kent obeyed. I followed Kramer upstairs to Richard Lawson's study. Lawson had been removed, but his death remained in the room. A leather chair stood behind a broad desk. A glass of mineral water sat beneath a clear evidence cover. Papers were aligned in neat piles. The windows were shut. A fire had burned low in the grate. No struggle, Kramer said. No break-in. The doctor thought heart failure until the laboratory man tested the glass. What poison? Not confirmed. Something that affects the heart. When did he die? Between midnight and 3. Who was here? His housekeeper, Martha Cole. His secretary, Clara Wynne, left at 8. His nephew, Peter Lawson, visited at 9 and left before 10. Business partner Gerald Ames arrived at 10:15 and says he left at 11. Anyone else? The rear door was locked. The cellar door was locked from this side. Key? On Lawson's ring. I looked at the fireplace. Among the ashes lay several blackened scraps of paper. One corner had escaped the flames. It carried 3 handwritten words, Tuesday. Cellar, umbrella. I pointed. Kramer's jaw tightened. You were going to mention that when I knew what it meant. It means Tuesday, cellar, umbrella. That is why Wolfe pays you. I told him about the hollow handle, the grey sealing compound, and the mud near the connecting door. Kramer listened without interrupting, which showed he disliked the facts more than he disliked me. A knock came at the study door. A uniformed officer entered, carrying an evidence envelope. Inspector, we found this behind the radiator. Inside was a small brass key. Kramer studied it. Not for any door in this house, I said. It may fit the hawthorn cellar. Kramer sent the officer with Kent to test it. It did. By 5 o'clock I had spoken briefly with the household. Martha Cole had served Lawson for 12 years. She said he had seemed nervous all week and had ordered the cellar passage inspected 2 months earlier. Clara Wynne, his secretary, said Lawson, had cancelled 3 appointments on Tuesday and spent an hour searching old business files. Peter Lawson admitted arguing with his uncle about money, but denied entering the cellar. Gerald Ames said his meeting concerned the sale of a warehouse property. He claimed Lawson was alive and healthy at 11. Each had a reason to lie. None had a reason to leave a dry umbrella in a storm, at least not yet. I returned to West 35th Street at 6:20. Wolfe was in the office, having completed his afternoon session with the orchids. Fritz had placed a bottle of beer before him, and the aroma from the kitchen suggested roast duck and a sauce that would not wait for murder. I reported everything. Wolfe listened with his eyes closed. When I finished, he opened them. The umbrella's hollow handle contained the key, he said. The brass key was found in Lawson's study. Then someone carried the umbrella through the connecting passage, removed the key in the study, and left the umbrella outside the Hawthorne cellar. Why not take it away? Because carrying a wet umbrella indoors would have attracted no notice. Carrying a perfectly dry one through a rainstorm would. So the killer left it behind. No. Wolfe reached for his beer. The killer placed it there before the rain could touch it. That means the cellar door was opened from inside. The umbrella was set beneath the ledge, and the door was closed immediately. As a marker? Possibly. Or a signal. To whom? That is the first question. And the second? Wolfe's eyes moved toward the envelope containing the grey sealing compound. Why did Richard Lawson write the word umbrella before he died? Fritz appeared at the office door and announced dinner. Wolfe rose. The umbrella was prepared months ago, he said. The hollow handle, the copied key, and the repeated attempts upon the cellar lock prove planning. Mr. Lawson's death was not an impulse. He started toward the dining room. I looked through the window at the rain pouring over West 35th Street. A dry umbrella had stood beside a wet cellar door, waiting to be noticed. Someone had planned a murder long before the storm arrived. Chapter 2: A Curious Path. The rain had not stopped by Friday morning. It had merely changed its method. Instead of attacking the windows in sheets, it tapped steadily against the glass, as if asking to be admitted. Wolfe, who considered weather an outside conspiracy, ignored it. At 8:45, he was finishing breakfast with kidneys, mushrooms, and a view of the morning newspaper that suggested the newspaper had disappointed him personally. I was working on coffee when he said, "You will return to the Hawthorne residence. I was there yesterday. Your memory remains adequate. You saw a door and a passage. You did not learn where the passage went. It went to Richard Lawson's cellar. One branch did." I lowered my cup. Harold Kent said nothing about branches. Mr. Kent has demonstrated that he reports facts only after they become inconvenient. That was fair. Wolfe folded the newspaper and placed it beside his plate. The umbrella had been carried through a cellar before it was left outside. The material on the handle will identify where it traveled. Trace the passage completely. You think the umbrella took the scenic route. Objects do not take routes. People carry them. People are harder to question. Then question the object first. At 9 o'clock, he went upstairs to the plant rooms. At 9:10, I put on a raincoat and went out to improve my opinion of indoor employment. The Hawthorne residence looked grayer than it had the day before. Water streamed from the brass canopy, and the doorman had adopted the expression of a man who had been opening umbrellas for several centuries. Harold Kent met me in the lobby. "Inspector Kramer questioned me until midnight," he said. "That is one of his social habits. I told him everything. You told me that yesterday." Kent did not enjoy the reminder. The umbrella remained in his office under police seal. Kramer had allowed it to stay there because 2 officers were posted in the building, and because Wolfe had made it clear that moving it again would only add more fingerprints to the collection. I opened the evidence wrapping with gloves and examined the umbrella beneath a strong desk lamp. The fabric was spotless. No rain marks, street grit, or dried drops showed on the black cloth. Whoever had placed it by the cellar door had kept it protected until the last moment. The handle was another matter. At first, the curved wood appeared clean, because someone had wiped it. Under the curve, however, a pale coating remained in the narrow grooves. It was finer than ordinary dust, and lighter than the coal dirt in Kent's cellar. I scraped a little onto black paper. Kent leaned over my shoulder. "What is it?" "Something that preferred the handle to the cloth. The dust contained tiny white grains and reddish particles. There were also traces of grey sealing material around the hollow joint beneath the silver collar. The person carrying the umbrella had kept the fabric covered or folded inside something, but had gripped the handle with a dusty hand." "Who uses plaster in the cellar?" I asked. "No one lately." "What about brick dust?" "The rear storage rooms have old brick walls." "Rooms?" Kent looked away. I gave him time. It took 6 seconds. "The passage is longer than I told you," he admitted. "There is a surprise. When the Hawthorne and neighboring houses were built, the cellars connected beneath the service yards. Coal and supplies could be moved without using the front entrances. How many buildings? 4 originally. The Hawthorne, Lawson's townhouse, the Calder building, and an empty house owned by a trust company. Which passages are still open? The one to Lawson's property. Another leads to storage rooms beneath the Calder building, but the final door is supposed to be sealed. Supposed? Kent rubbed his mustache. I have never opened it. Today your education continues. We went downstairs. The Hawthorne cellar was brighter than it had been the previous afternoon because Samuel Pike had hung 2 work lamps along the wall. Pike was a heavy man with a bald head and hands built for coal shovels. He disliked questions and appeared to dislike me as their representative. "The floor was clean Monday," he said. "I already told the police." "You cleaned the whole passage." "I swept from the boiler room to Lawson's door." "What about the other branch?" He looked at Kent. I said. That question was directed at the man holding the broom. Pike's jaw tightened. "Nobody uses the other branch. That makes it easy to clean. I haven't touched it in months." We passed the door leading to Lawson's cellar and continued behind a row of coal bins. A wooden cabinet hid most of the rear wall. Kent and Pike moved it aside, exposing a narrow brick arch and a second iron door. The lock was old, but polished around the keyhole. "Someone uses it," I said. Kent shook his head. "I do not have a key." Pike had one. He produced it slowly from a ring attached to his belt. "You said nobody uses the passage." I said the tenants don't. "Who does?" "I check it sometimes." "How often?" "When Mr. Kent tells me." Kent said, "I have never told you to open it." Pike's face changed. "Not enough to confess to murder, but enough to confess to something." I held out my hand. "The key." He gave it to me. The door opened inward with a scrape. Beyond it was a corridor barely wide enough for 2 men to pass. The floor was stone, the walls old red brick. Pipes ran overhead, and white plaster had fallen in patches from the ceiling. The dust on the floor was pale and fine. It matched the dust beneath the umbrella handle. I walked carefully, keeping near the wall. Several sets of footprints crossed the passage. Some were old and blurred. 2 were recent enough to show edges. One came from a broad work shoe, probably Pike's. The other was narrower and smooth-soled. About 20 feet ahead, the corridor divided. The left branch ended at a bricked wall. The right led to 3 storage rooms and another locked door. The first room contained broken chairs, old lamps, and wooden crates. The second was filled with rolled carpets and unused building materials. The third had almost nothing in it except a table, 2 chairs, and a small electric heater. That room had been used recently. A clean square on the dusty table showed where an object had rested. 2 glasses stood on a shelf. An ashtray contained the remains of a cigar. A wastebasket held 3 torn pieces of paper. I fitted them together. The top portion was missing, but the surviving lines read, "Friday, 8:30. Same entrance. Bring the revised transfer. No telephone calls." There was no signature. Kent read over my shoulder. "I have never seen that. Your cellar has a private office. You should charge rent. Pike remained in the doorway. I turned to him. Who used this room? Nobody. The cigar smoked itself. He stared at the floor. Kent said Samuel answer him. Pike's shoulders sagged. Mr. Lawson came sometimes. That was the first useful sentence of the morning. How many times? I asked. I don't know. 6 or 7. When did it begin? Last autumn. How did he enter? Through his own cellar. Who met him? Pike shook his head. You opened the Hawthorne's side for someone. No. You have the only key. There is another. Who has it? I don't know. That answer was so poor it needed assistance. I stepped closer. Mr. Pike, Richard Lawson, was poisoned. Someone used these passages around the time he died. You can explain now, or Inspector Kramer can explain your silence to a judge. He swallowed. A lady came twice, he said. Name? I never heard it. Description? Tall. Dark coat. Grey hat with a narrow brim. She kept her face turned away. Age? 40, maybe younger. Did she meet Lawson? Yes. Anyone else? A man came more often. What man? Thin. Good clothes. Carried a leather case. Thomas Reed? I asked automatically, then remembered. This was another case and another dead businessman. Pike stared blankly. I corrected course. Gerald Ames? I have seen Mr. Ames at Lawson's house. It could have been him. Peter Lawson? No. The man was older. Did the man smoke cigars? I think so. Did Richard Lawson pay you? Pike hesitated. Kent exploded. Samuel Pike looked miserable. $10 each time, just to keep the passage open and say nothing. When was Lawson here last? Monday night. The umbrella appeared early Tuesday morning. Who met him Monday? I don't know. I opened the door at 7 and went upstairs. When I came back at 9, the room was empty. Was the umbrella here? No. Are you certain? Yes. I would have noticed it. Did you see a case, bottle, papers, anything unusual? There was a black cloth bag on the table. How large? Long and narrow, like something used for a fishing rod. An umbrella could have fit inside it. I searched the room more carefully. Behind the heater, I found a small patch of black fabric caught on a screw. Near the table leg was a drop of hardened grey sealing compound. The umbrella had been prepared in that room. The third door at the end of the corridor led into the Calder building. Kent's key did not fit, but the lock showed recent scratches. There was a narrow space beneath it. Air moved through the gap. I knelt and saw a line of fresh mud on the other side. Who manages the Calder building? I asked. Mrs. Emily Calder. She also manages the Hawthorne. That explained why Kent had mentioned her before. We went upstairs and telephoned her office. Mrs. Calder arrived 20 minutes later. She was a compact woman in her late 50s, dressed in dark green and carrying enough authority to organize an evacuation without raising her voice. She was not pleased to discover that her buildings contained a private meeting room. I ordered that passage sealed 5 years ago, she said. It was not sealed, I replied. She looked at Kent. Kent looked at Pike. Pike looked ready to resign from looking. Mrs. Calder had a key to the Calder's side. We entered through the neighboring basement. The Calder building was smaller than the Hawthorne and contained offices on the first 3 floors, with apartments above. Its basement storage area was used by tenants, a cleaning company, and a small printing firm. The connecting door opened from that side. Just inside lay more pale plaster dust and a partial shoe print. The heel was narrow and sharply squared, Mrs. Calder said. Several women in the building wear shoes like that. Several women in Manhattan do too. We will try not to arrest all of them. She did not smile. I asked whether Richard Lawson had visited the Calder building. She said no. Then a storage clerk named Milton Ross said yes. Ross had seen Lawson enter the basement 6 months earlier with Gerald Ames. 2 months later, Lawson returned alone. 3 weeks before his death, he came with a woman matching Pike's description. Mrs. Calder's expression hardened. Why was I not told? Ross shrugged. Mr. Ames said they were inspecting storage space. Gerald Ames' name had now appeared twice along the cellar route. I returned to the Hawthorne lobby and began questioning employees and long-term tenants. People who deny knowing anything often know exactly how much they can safely forget. The elevator operator remembered Richard Lawson visiting the Hawthorne at least 4 times during the winter. Lawson never signed the guest book and never went above the ground floor. A maid had seen him leave through the rear service hall. An elderly tenant named Mrs. Mercer recalled passing him near the cellar stairs with a tall woman. She could not identify the woman, but remembered a silver pin shaped like a bird on her coat. Harold Kent admitted Lawson had paid him once to inspect a leaking pipe in the hidden meeting room. "You knew he used it," I said. "Only that once. You have a strong attachment to delayed truth." I did not know he was doing anything illegal. Secret meetings in underground rooms are rarely held to discuss gardening. By 3 o'clock I had assembled a list of Lawson's visits over 6 months. October 12 with Gerald Ames. November 3 alone. December 18 with the unidentified woman. January 9 with Ames. February 14 alone. March 2 with the woman. Monday night, 2 days before his death, with an unknown visitor. The dates meant nothing until I compared them with Lawson's business calendar, which Kramer had reluctantly allowed me to inspect. Each visit followed a meeting involving one of 3 matters: a warehouse sale, a private trust, or a company called Lawson Consolidated Imports. The Monday visit followed a board meeting at which Lawson had announced an internal audit. I called Wolfe from Mrs. Calder's office. He came to the telephone after 11 minutes because the orchids had precedence over underground conspiracies. I reported the passage network, the dust, the secret room, Pike's payments, and Lawson's visits. The umbrella was carried in a black cloth bag, I finished. It was assembled or opened in the meeting room. The dust under the handle matches the corridor. Lawson used the place for at least 6 months. Who accompanied him? Gerald Ames twice. An unidentified woman at least twice. Possibly someone else Monday night. Describe the woman. I gave him Pike's and Mrs. Mercer's descriptions, including the silver bird pin. Mr. Lawson's secretary? Clara Wynne is tall and around 40. I have not seen her in a grey hat. His housekeeper? Martha Cole is older and shorter. Mrs. Calder? Wrong build. Learn whether Miss Wynne owns such a pin. You think the mystery may yield to jewelry? People change coats and hats. They retain favored ornaments. What about Gerald Ames? Trace the business matters discussed on every date Lawson visited the passage. That could take days. Then begin. He paused. The umbrella's owner remains irrelevant. Its route is decisive. Someone prepared it underground, used the hollow handle to transport a key, carried it into Lawson's house, and placed it outside the Hawthorne cellar after returning. As proof of the route, perhaps. As a signal, perhaps. You are generous with possibilities. They are cheaper than errors. He hung up. Inspector Kramer arrived before I left. Someone had informed him that I was collecting passages, keys, and witnesses without police permission. I gave him the torn note and showed him the secret room. He listened to Pike's statement, placed 2 officers in the cellar, and then turned on me. You knew about this for how long? Roughly 3 hours. You called Wolfe before me. He answers more politely. Kramer read the note again. Friday, 8:30. Same entrance. Bring the revised transfer. What transfer? That is what Wolfe told me to learn. I did not ask what Wolfe told you. Then we are both asking the same question. Kramer's men searched the room. One found a fingerprint on the inside of a glass. Another recovered a small piece of carbon paper from beneath the table. The print belonged to Richard Lawson. The carbon paper contained reversed impressions of typed words. Under angled light, we could read fragments. Ownership shares. Payments suspended. Evidence retained until the final line showed 2 initials. G.A. Gerald Ames had claimed his meetings with Lawson concerned a warehouse sale. He had not mentioned an underground room, suspended payments, or retained evidence. Kramer sent Pearlie Stebbins to bring him in. I went to see Clara Wynne. Lawson's secretary occupied a small office near Grand Central. She was tall, dark-haired, and about 38. A silver bird pin was fastened to the lapel of her black jacket. She saw me looking at it. "It belonged to my mother," she said. "Do you wear it often?" "Nearly every day." "Did you meet Richard Lawson beneath the Hawthorne residence?" Her face went still. "No." "Did you own a grey hat?" "Many women do." That was not the question. She stood. "This conversation is finished, Mr. Lawson visited a secret cellar room on December 18th and March 2nd with a woman wearing that pin. She touched it without meaning to. Who told you?" "That is almost an answer." She walked to the window. After a long silence, she said, "Richard was afraid his office was being watched." "By whom?" "Gerald Ames." "Why?" They had been partners for 20 years. Richard discovered that company ownership records had been altered. He believed Gerald was preparing to sell assets without his consent. "What did you do in the cellar?" "I brought copies of documents." Richard did not trust his safe. "Did you meet him Monday night?" "No. Who did?" "I do not know." "Did you prepare the revised transfer mentioned in this note?" I showed it to her. Her face changed again. "Yes. Richard instructed me to revise ownership of a warehouse property. He intended to remove Gerald's authority to sell it." "Where is the document?" "I gave it to Richard Monday afternoon. It was not in Lawson's study." "Did the umbrella belong to you?" "No." "Did you know about its hollow handle?" She turned sharply. "What hollow handle?" That reaction looked genuine. When I returned to West 35th Street, it was after 6. Wolfe sat in the office with beer before him and a book open in one hand. Fritz had begun preparing dinner, and the house smelled of onions, herbs, and something roasting patiently. I gave Wolfe the day's results. He closed the book. "Miss Wynn's secrecy concerned the altered ownership documents, not the murder," he said. "You accept her denial. For the moment, she has supplied a motive for Mr. Ames, and a reason Lawson used the underground room. Yes, he was collecting evidence against his partner while preparing to remove his authority." "What about Monday night?" "That meeting was decisive. The revised transfer entered the room and did not leave with Lawson, unless the killer took it. The umbrella carried the cellar key into Lawson's study. Or carried something else first and the key later." I frowned. The compartment was empty when I opened it. Empty compartments have histories. He leaned back. The umbrella fabric was spotless because it traveled inside the black cloth bag. The dust on the handle, proof it was removed and handled in the underground room. Someone then crossed into Lawson's cellar, entered the townhouse, and later returned through the same route. Why leave the umbrella outside? To indicate that the passage had been used. To whom? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Possibly to Lawson. Possibly to an accomplice. Possibly to create evidence against someone familiar with the passage. That gives us 3 possibilities again. One will survive. He instructed me to trace every transaction connected with Lawson's secret meetings, identify who benefited from the warehouse transfer, and determine whether Gerald Ames owned a key to either cellar door. I rose. "Dinner in 7 minutes. Do you want the good news first?" "There is no good news. It has stopped raining." Wolfe glanced toward the window. For the first time in a week, water was no longer striking the glass. The street outside shone black beneath the lamps. The dry umbrella had led us from a cellar door to an underground room, from the room to 6 months of secret meetings, and from those meetings to altered ownership records. It had revealed where Richard Lawson had been. It had not yet revealed who followed him home. Chapter 3. The meeting's underground Saul Panzer came to the brownstone at 10:18 the next morning, with rain on his hat and facts in his pocket. The rain had returned before dawn, proving that New York weather could hold a grudge. Wolfe was upstairs with the orchids. Fritz had cleared breakfast and was discussing lunch with himself in the kitchen, a conversation in which no outside opinion was welcome. Saul took the yellow chair and placed a narrow notebook on my desk. Richard Lawson used the rear entrance of the Hawthorne more often than anyone admitted, he said. How often? 11 recorded visits in 6 months. Possibly more. I opened the notebook. The Hawthorne kept a service log for deliveries, repairs, and after-hours entry. Lawson's name did not appear. Instead, the night employees had recorded him as R.L., visitor from rear property, or simply authorized by management. Who authorized him? I asked. 3 different people. George Bennett, Walter Drake, and Emily Harper. Those were new names for a case that already had enough names to stock a committee. Occupations? Bennett is an accountant with an office on the 2nd floor of the Calder building. Drake manages several properties owned by the same trust that holds the empty house beside Lawson's townhouse. Harper is an investor and a tenant on the 8th floor of the Hawthorne. Connected to Lawson? All 3 had business dealings with him. Saul turned the notebook toward me. Every recorded visit occurred after 8 at night. Most fell on rainy or snowy evenings, when fewer people used the service yard. Lawson stayed between 30 and 55 minutes. He never entered through the front lobby. He liked privacy, I said. He paid for it. Samuel Pike received $10 per visit. Another porter received 5. Did Lawson meet all 3 together? Not according to the logs. Bennett appeared on 4 nights, Drake on 3, Harper on 2. The remaining visits are uncertain. What about Gerald Ames and Clara Wynne? Neither was named in the service records. Ames may have entered through Lawson's cellar. Miss Wynne may have used the Calder side. That explained how several people could reach the same room without appearing in the same building. At 11:30, Wolfe entered from the plant rooms. He crossed to his desk, settled into his chair, and looked at Saul. Report. Saul repeated the facts in the proper order. Wolfe listened without moving, except to press the call button for beer. Rainy nights, Wolfe said when Saul finished. Yes. Not merely evenings. 9 of the 11 visits occurred during bad weather. Then weather provided concealment. Servants remained indoors. Rear yards were empty, and anyone carrying an umbrella attracted no notice. I said, except one umbrella stayed dry. Wolfe ignored that. What business connected Lawson to these 3? Saul opened another page. George Bennett prepared accounts for Lawson, Consolidated Imports, and for 2 warehouse companies. Walter Drake managed leases and maintenance on the Hawthorne, the Calder building, and the empty trust property. Emily Harper invested in Lawson's warehouse venture 3 years ago. Was she profitable? No. The venture reported losses. Reported? The property increased in value. The losses came from service charges paid to companies controlled by Gerald Ames. Wolfe's lips pushed forward. So Mr. Ames extracted money. Mr. Bennett recorded it. Mr. Drake controlled access to the properties. Miss Harper supplied capital. And Lawson discovered the arrangement, I said. Perhaps. Wolfe turned to me. You will speak with all 3. First inspect the underground room again. I inspected it yesterday. You noticed a table, chairs, glasses, an ashtray, a heater, and torn paper. You did not establish who sat where. Chairs rarely give statements. Furniture records use. Discover what it recorded. That sent me back into the rain. The Hawthorne cellar now had 2 uniformed officers, 3 police SEALs, and 1 furious superintendent. Harold Kent met me at the bottom of the stairs. Inspector Kramer said no one enters without permission. I have permission. From him? From someone harder to please. The officer telephoned headquarters. Kramer objected, then allowed me 20 minutes with instructions not to move anything. 20 minutes is enough if you know what you are looking for. I did not, but I went anyway. The hidden room beyond the rear corridor looked as it had the previous day. Dust covered the floor except where recent shoes had disturbed it. The wooden table stood beneath a bare electric bulb. 2 chairs faced each other. A third rested against the wall. I began with the table. Its surface was scratched and stained from years of storage. Most of the dust had been wiped away in an uneven rectangle. 4 pale circles marked places where cups or glasses had stood. 2 circles were near one end, close together. 1 was opposite them. The 4th was near the side edge. Someone had held meetings of 3 or 4 people. Near the center of the table were repeated parallel scratches, each about 2 inches long. They formed two groups on opposite sides. I placed my briefcase on the table and opened it. The metal clasp struck the wood at exactly the same angle as one set of marks. The other group was narrower. 2 different cases had been opened there repeatedly. A darker line near the table's edge showed where paper had been pressed down while someone wrote. Under angled light, I saw shallow impressions. I took a soft pencil from my pocket, placed a sheet over the surface, and rubbed lightly. Fragments appeared. Bennett figures, Harper share, Drake access. A final line was too faint to read completely. Ames cannot know until transfer. That was enough to make 20 minutes ambitious. I called Kramer from the Cellar office. He arrived 35 minutes later with a laboratory man and a complaint. You rubbed pencil over evidence. I rubbed paper over a table. You could have damaged it. I could also have left it invisible. The laboratory man photographed the impressions and used better equipment to recover more of the final line. Ames cannot know until transfer is signed. Kramer stared at it. Lawson was planning something without Ames. The revised ownership transfer Clara Wynne prepared, I said. The clean area on the table held another clue. A square patch near one corner had remained dusty while the rest was wiped. Whatever had sat there had protected the surface during cleaning. Its shape matched a small metal cash box or document case. In the wastebasket, beneath the torn note already found, the laboratory man recovered coffee grounds wrapped in paper. The paper came from a shop near the Calder building. The room had not been used casually. It had been maintained for business. My first interview was with George Bennett. His office occupied 2 rooms above a printing company. Bennett was 55, round-faced, soft-voiced, and dressed in a brown suit that seemed designed to make him invisible at tax hearings. He recognized my name and disliked it. I have spoken with the police, he said. That puts you ahead of many criminals. I am not a criminal. That remains convenient. He invited me to sit, but did not offer coffee. Considering the rings on the underground table, I had hoped he might. You kept accounts for Richard Lawson, I said, for some of his companies. You met him in the cellar beneath the hawthorn. His expression remained mild. Who told you that? Service logs, employees, and dust. I occasionally met him in a storage room because he valued privacy. What did you discuss? Business accounts. Which accounts? Warehouse expenses. Gerald Ames's companies. Bennett's fingers moved together. Mr. Ames provided management services at generous prices. That is a matter of interpretation. Lawson's interpretation changed before his death. Bennett looked toward the closed office door. Richard believed certain fees were excessive. He believed they were fraudulent. I did not say that. You did not need to. He'd admitted that Lawson had asked him to reconstruct 3 years of warehouse payments. The figures showed that nearly $400,000 had been paid to companies connected with Ames. Did Lawson plan to accuse him? I asked. He planned to remove his authority over the properties. The revised transfer? Bennett's eyes sharpened. You have seen it? No. It disappeared. I never had it. What did you keep in the metal box on the cellar table? That got him. I do not know what you mean. The dust outline is the size of a document box. You carried a briefcase. Someone else carried a narrower case. Coffee cups were used. Notes on the table mention your figures. Bennett stood and walked to a filing cabinet. He opened it, removed a small steel box, and placed it on the desk. The dusty square. I kept duplicate ledgers there, he said. Richard feared his office files were being altered. Where are the ledgers? Gone when? I went to the room Wednesday afternoon after learning of his death. The box was empty. Why did you not report it? Because the records made me appear involved. Were you? No, but I had prepared the accounts Ames used. Who knew about the box? Richard, Walter Drake, and possibly Emily Harper. Did Gerald Ames know? Richard believed not. Bennett admitted attending 4 meetings. Lawson, Drake, and Harper had each attended at different times. The final meeting, 3 weeks earlier, included all 4. What was decided? I asked. That Richard would transfer control of the warehouse property into a new company. Miss Harper would receive voting rights. Drake would manage the property. I would provide the audit. And Ames? He would lose control. There was motive enough for Ames, but not yet an umbrella. Walter Drake worked from the ground floor of the empty trust property beside the Hawthorne. He was 48, lean, neatly dressed, and had a narrow scar along his chin. His office contained keys, leases, floor plans, and enough building diagrams to make him useful to anyone planning an underground journey. He denied attending secret meetings. I showed him a copy of the service log. He studied it. My initials merely authorized Lawson's access. You authorized him and then joined him. Prove it. The table says you discussed access. A table said that? It writes better than some. Witnesses. Drake remained calm until I mentioned the missing duplicate ledgers. Then he crossed one leg over the other and looked at his shoe. I knew Bennett stored records there, he said. Did you remove them? No. Who had keys? Lawson, Bennett, Pike, and me. Emily Harper, she had one for 2 weeks. Gerald Ames, not officially. Could he obtain one? Ames knew the buildings. He also knew several employees. Drake admitted managing the passage at Lawson's request. He had arranged repairs, replaced the cellar lock 3 months earlier, and kept the room heated. Why did Lawson trust you? I asked. He did not. He trusted arrangements. Did you meet him Monday night? No. Where were you? At home. Witness, my wife. Wives are useful. His smile was thin. Before leaving, I asked to see the master key cabinet. One hook was empty. The label beneath it read, "Rear passage." Set B. Who has that key? I asked. Drake looked at the empty hook as if seeing it for the first time. It should be there. When did you last see it? Last week. Who has access to this office? My assistant, Harold Kent, Mrs. Calder, and Emily Harper. She came Monday afternoon to review a lease. That sent me back to the Hawthorne. Emily Harper lived on the 8th floor in an apartment with pale walls, modern furniture, and windows overlooking rain-polished roofs. She was 42, tall, composed, and wore a silver bracelet shaped like twisted leaves. No bird pin. I expected you, she said. Then I hope you prepared coffee. She did. Her coffee cup was white porcelain with a narrow raised base. The base matched one of the ring marks on the cellar table. I placed it down carefully. You have used this cup downstairs, I said. Her eyes moved to it. Many cups look alike. This one belongs to the Hawthorne service set. The underground room has the same cups on a shelf. She sat opposite me. What do you want? The truth would be unusual. She looked out at the rain. I invested $200,000 in Richard Lawson's warehouse project, she said. Gerald Ames managed it. For 3 years, he reported losses. Richard finally admitted the property was profitable and the losses were manufactured. Why meet underground? Because Gerald had contacts in Lawson's office and in the building. Richard believed his mail was opened. What was your role in the transfer? I was to become controlling investor in a new company after Ames was removed. Did you attend the Monday meeting? No, Richard cancelled it. How? A note was pushed under my apartment door Monday afternoon. She produced it from a desk drawer. Meeting postponed, wait for further instructions. The note was typed, no signature. Did you confirm with Lawson? I telephoned his office. Clara Wynne said he had gone out. Did you go to the cellar anyway? No. Who knew you had a key? Walter Drake gave it to me because I had to review property files. Where is it? She opened her handbag and handed me a brass key. It fit the Calder side of the underground passage, not the missing set B key. Did you see an umbrella in the room during any meeting? I asked. No. A black cloth bag? She hesitated. Once. 3 months ago. Gerald Ames brought it. That moved the ground. Ames attended? He was not supposed to. He entered from Lawson's side while Richard and I were discussing the audit. He said he had followed Richard. What was in the bag? I do not know. It was long and narrow. Did Ames open it? No. He kept it beside his chair. When he left, did he take it? Yes. The black cloth bag had belonged to Ames, or at least had once traveled with him. I called Wolfe from Harper's apartment. I gave him Bennett's duplicate ledgers, Drake's missing master key, Harper's cancelled meeting, and Ames's earlier possession of the long black bag. Wolfe listened. "Who benefits from the missing ledgers?" he asked. "Ames. They prove the false management charges." "Who benefits from the vanished transfer?" "Ames again. Without it, his authority may remain in place." "Who knew the underground route?" "Everyone we have named, though Ames had no official key." "Official keys are an administrative comfort, not a barrier." "You think Ames planned the passage and umbrella months ago?" "I think preparation began when Lawson replaced the lock 3 months ago. The first scratch appeared then, Mr. Ames discovered his partner was investigating him and sought another means of access." I said, "The umbrella carried a copied key." "Yes." "Then why did Lawson write Tuesday, Cellar? Umbrella?" "Because he learned the object had been used or intended to use it himself. That is generous to both sides." "Return here." When I arrived at West 35th Street, Saul was back. Wolfe sat behind his desk, with the service logs arranged before him. Saul had traced the dates of the underground meetings against Lawson's banking records. On each visit, Lawson reviewed a different payment stream. After meetings with Bennett, he froze accounting transfers. After meetings with Drake, he changed property access. After meetings with Harper, he prepared ownership revisions. Every step reduced Ames's control. "The meetings were not merely private business," Wolfe said. "They were stages in Lawson's counterattack." And Monday night was the final stage. Yes, the revised transfer was ready. The duplicate ledgers were stored below. Lawson intended to sign the transfer and confront Ames with proof. Did Ames know? He knew enough. He had followed Lawson before, carried the umbrella bag into the room, and likely obtained the missing master key. Saul said, "Ames's company ordered custom umbrellas as client gifts last year. Black fabric, curved wooden handles, silver collars. That was the best fact of the day." "Any hollow handles?" I asked. The manufacturer made 6 presentation models with removable handles for engraved message tubes. Wolfe's eyes half closed. The umbrella was not improvised. It was selected months ago because its handle could conceal a key or vial. "Who received the 6? Saul consulted his notes. "1 went to Lawson, 1 to Ames, 1 to Emily Harper, 1 to George Bennett. 2 remained in the company office." I looked at Wolfe. "So if everyone can own the umbrella?" "Ownership remains unimportant," he said. "Use is what matters." He placed 3 sheets side by side, the service logs, the recovered table impressions, and Lawson's banking timeline. "Mr. Lawson conducted an investigation underground because he feared his office was compromised. Mr. Bennett supplied figures, Mr. Drake supplied access. Miss Harper supplied financial standing and stood to receive control. Mr. Ames was the target, and Clara Wynne prepared the transfer." "Yes. Then whoever killed Lawson also took the transfer and ledgers." "Almost certainly. What about the poison?" "Still unresolved." "And the umbrella?" Wolfe looked toward the rain-darkened window. "It entered the underground room in Mr. Ames's possession 3 months ago. Its hollow handle later carried a copied key. It traveled from the meeting room through Lawson's cellar and into his study. After the murder, it returned by the same route and was placed outside the Hawthorne door. As a signal?" "No." That was the first firm answer he had given on the subject. "Then why leave it? To make the route appear to begin at the Hawthorne?" "I considered that. The killer wanted us to think someone entered from the apartment building." "Yes. But the umbrella was dry. It had not crossed the yard from the Hawthorne side. It came from underground. So the clue meant to mislead us proves the opposite." Wolfe nodded. "The murderer knew the passages, the locks, the meetings, and the weather. He prepared the object long before Lawson died. That is planning, Archie, not opportunity." Fritz entered and announced dinner. Wolfe rose. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will learn which of the 6 umbrellas disappeared first. From Ames's office? From wherever the murderer believed it would not be missed." He went toward the dining room. The rain continued against the windows. Beneath neighboring buildings, An old wooden table held the scars of briefcases, the rings of coffee cups, and the faint record of a conspiracy conducted out of sight. Richard Lawson had gone underground to protect his business. Someone had followed him there to prepare his death. Chapter 4. The plan from months ago. A murderer who plans 6 months ahead deserves no admiration, but he does deserve attention. At 9:20 the next morning, Inspector Creamer telephoned to report that Richard Lawson's private safe had finally been opened. He sounded disappointed, which meant it contained paper instead of a confession. There are contracts, maps, property reports, and enough company records to choke an accountant, he said. Get over here. Is that an invitation from the city? It is an order. Wolfe does not take orders before breakfast. I asked for you. That explains the lack of courtesy. Creamer hung up. Wolfe was in the dining room finishing corn cakes with sausage and a sauce. Fritz had spent half the morning preparing. I gave him the message. What property reports? He asked. Creamer did not describe them. Then he has summoned the wrong man. Bring copies of everything concerning the warehouse project. You expect me to recognize what matters. I expect you to recognize what repeats. At 10:15 I reached Lawson's townhouse. The rain had stopped again, though the sky looked prepared to reconsider. Creamer was in the study with Pearlie Stebbins and 2 clerks from the district attorney's office. The safe stood open behind a painting. Its contents had been arranged across the desk. Lawson had kept his important records in 3 groups. Personal papers occupied one drawer. Company documents filled another. The third contained files concerning a project called the North River Commercial Terminal. The name had appeared in none of our previous interviews. I opened the thickest folder. Inside were maps of a waterfront district, engineering reports, photographs of warehouses, lease schedules, and plans for a large freight terminal with offices, storage buildings, and rail access. The project was not yet public. A typed memorandum gave the planned completion date. 6 months from then, the city would approve a transportation connections that would multiply the property's value. How much? I asked. Creamer handed me an appraisal. The current value was $8 million. The projected value after approval was more than $25 million. That could make a man interested, I said. It made several men interested. Lawson Consolidated already controls 40% through warehouse leases and purchase options. Who controls the rest? That is the problem. Several pages had been removed from the ownership section. The numbered sequence jumped from page 12 to page 17. A schedule of private investors ended halfway through the alphabet. The final signature page of a transfer agreement was gone. I found a note in Lawson's handwriting clipped to the inside cover. Completion in 6 months. No announcement before control is secured. GA must not learn revised terms. EH. To receive full account after signing. George Bennett to verify figures. Drake to confirm access and leases. The initials, GA, could only mean Gerald Ames. EH meant Emily Harper. Creamer read over my shoulder. Everyone is in it, not necessarily on the same side. I examined the maps. Several buildings in the underground passage network sat inside the future terminal district. The Hawthorne was outside the development line, but the Calder building, Lawson's townhouse, and the empty trust property bordered land needed for the project. One narrow parcel controlled the planned service entrance. Without it, the terminal could not be completed as designed. The parcel was owned by a company called Greybridge Properties. Who owns Greybridge? I asked. Creamer gave me a sour look. We are tracing it. I checked the documents again. Walter Drake managed the property, but no individual owner was listed. A preliminary agreement showed that Lawson intended to purchase Greybridge in 6 months for its present value. If the transportation approval became public first, the price would triple. Anyone with advance knowledge could buy shares, acquire nearby leases, or block the project and demand a fortune. I found dates written beside several negotiation updates. October 10. November 1, December 16, January 7, February 12, March 1. Each date fell 1 or 2 days before Lawson's recorded visits to the underground room. I telephoned Wolfe. The meetings followed property updates, I said. Every time Lawson received new information about the North River terminal, he met someone beneath the hawthorn. Every time, within 48 hours. Who attended? Bennett after financial revisions, Drake after lease or access changes, Harper after investment updates. Ames may have followed at least once. And the missing papers? Investor names, ownership pages, and the signed transfer. Then Mr. Lawson was not merely investigating theft. He was securing control of a future development, worth $25 million after city approval. Public approval? Not yet announced. Who knew? That is becoming the expensive question. Wolfe told me to bring the files. Kramer refused to let the originals leave. He allowed copies after I reminded him that Wolfe could study them at home, or Kramer could bring his entire investigation to West 35th Street and spend the afternoon being corrected in person. By noon, the copies were on Wolfe's long table. Wolfe read in silence while I ate sandwiches. Fritz had packed with enough care to make police headquarters tolerable. He arranged the dates into 3 rows. The first showed updates to the terminal negotiations. The second showed Lawson's underground meetings. The third showed suspicious payments made through Gerald Ames's management companies. Wolfe tapped the final row. Mr. Ames's false charges were not the principal crime. He stole $400,000, a profitable side activity, but the future property value offered millions. You think the false charges financed purchases around the terminal? Possibly. Or concealed payments to acquire control before the announcement. Saul Panzer arrived at 1:15 with information about Greybridge Properties. The company had been created 18 months earlier. Its shares were held through 3 smaller corporations. One was administered by George Bennett's accounting office. Another used Walter Drake's business address. The third belonged to an investment trust in which Emily Harper was the largest contributor. All 3 owned the vital parcel, I asked. Indirectly, Saul said, but none has complete control. A 4th certificate, representing 26%, is missing from the public file. Who held it? Richard Lawson may have, or Gerald Ames. Wolfe's eyes closed for 3 seconds. The vanished signature page concerned certificate, he said. Without it, ownership cannot be proved. He instructed me to bring Bennett, Drake, and Harper to the brownstone separately. Bennett arrived first. George Bennett sat in the red leather chair and looked toward the property documents on the table. You found the terminal file, he said. That saves an accusation, I replied. Wolfe regarded him. You attended underground meetings after every financial revision to the North River project. Bennett adjusted his spectacles. Mr. Lawson wished to keep the negotiations confidential. Why underground? Because Gerald Ames had access to Lawson's office and employees. Did you prepare the Greybridge companies? I prepared records for one of them. You prepared records for all 3. Bennett's face sagged. I followed instructions from Lawson and Miss Harper. Did Mr. Ames know the true property value? Not at first. When did he learn? 3 months ago. He appeared at one of the meetings unexpectedly. The night he carried the black umbrella bag. Bennett stared at me. Yes. What was in it? I never saw, Wolfe said. What happened at that meeting? Ames accused Lawson of planning to remove him from the terminal project. Lawson denied it. They argued. Ames said no transfer could occur without the missing Greybridge certificate. Who possessed it? Bennett looked down. I believed Lawson did. Where is it now? I do not know. Why were your duplicate ledgers removed from the underground room? I did not remove them. Did they show payments to companies connected with Ames? Yes. Did they also show purchases of property shares? Bennett hesitated too long. Yes. By whom? An account identified only as H Investment. Emily Harper arrived 20 minutes after Bennett left. She refused the red leather chair and stood beside the long table. Wolfe asked whether H investment belonged to her. That is private, she said. Mr. Lawson has been murdered. Privacy is not armor. I invested in the terminal project legally, using confidential information. I was invited by Richard, before the city approval became public. Yes. Did you intend to acquire Greybridge's controlling share? Her jaw tightened. Richard intended to transfer the missing certificate to me. In return, I would finance completion of the terminal. What would Mr. Ames receive? Nothing. That supplied a motive. I did not kill Richard. Why did you refuse to discuss the matter with Mr. Goodwin? Because advance knowledge of the city plan could expose me to prosecution and destroy my reputation. Did you possess the umbrella? My company received one of the presentation models. I gave it to Walter Drake for use in the building office. That was new. When? I asked. 5 months ago. Why? The umbrella contained a removable message tube. Richard thought it could be used to carry small documents through the cellar without placing them in an ordinary envelope. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. So the umbrella was originally part of Lawson's secrecy. Yes. Did it ever carry the Greybridge certificate? Emily Harper looked toward the window. Richard said he might hide the certificate inside it. The umbrella's hollow handle had not merely carried a copied key. It may once have contained ownership worth millions. Wolfe asked. Who knew that? Richard, Walter Drake, George Bennett, and me. Gerald Ames. He may have overheard us during the meeting, he interrupted. Walter Drake arrived at 3:30. He sat stiffly and denied everything until Wolfe informed him that Emily Harper had identified the umbrella as his. Drake's denial lasted another 30 seconds. She gave it to me, he admitted. Lawson used it twice to move documents. Through the hollow handle, Wolfe asked. Yes. What documents? Copies of lease options. Once a key, the key to Lawson's cellar? Yes. He wanted a spare kept in the underground room. Who copied it? I did. Did you give another copy to Ames? No. Did he have access to your key cabinet? He visited my office several times. The Set B master key disappeared last week. I know. Why did you conceal the loss? I feared being blamed. You have selected an excellent method for achieving that result. Drake's expression hardened. I provided access. That is all. Wolfe placed a map before him. You managed Greybridge's vital parcel. You knew the city plan. You knew the existing value and the future value. You knew Lawson intended to transfer control to Miss Harper. Yes. Did you profit? I was promised a management contract after completion. Worth $50,000 a year. Enough to inspire cooperation, not enough to inspire murder. Drake looked relieved. Wolfe continued. But you also knew the certificate might be hidden in the umbrella. The relief vanished. I never saw it there. Who removed the umbrella from your office? It disappeared 3 months ago, after Ames came to inspect property maps. You did not report it. I thought Lawson had taken it. Did you ask? No. The umbrella had disappeared at the same time someone first attempted the new cellar lock, months before Lawson's death. The killer had obtained both the special umbrella and knowledge of the copied key. After Drake left, Wolfe remained silent for nearly a minute. I said, Ames stole the umbrella 3 months ago, copied the cellar key, and waited for Lawson to finish arranging the transfer. Likely. He knew the project would be completed in 6 months and worth millions. Yes, he needed Lawson dead before the certificate went to Harper. Possibly. You are still saving room for evidence. Saul had spent the afternoon tracing property purchases. At 5:10 he telephoned. Gerald Ames controlled a company that had quietly purchased options on 3 parcels beside the future terminal. Those options were nearly worthless unless the terminal received the planned service entrance through Greybridge land. If Harper obtained Greybridge, she could cancel the access agreement and ruin Ames's investment. If Ames obtained the missing certificate, he could control the entrance and demand millions. When I repeated the information, Wolfe grunted. The murder was planned when Ames learned Lawson intended to transfer the certificate. 3 months ago, the umbrella disappeared then. The cellar lock was tested then. A duplicate key was prepared then. The underground room was watched then. And the poison? Quiet later, when the final signing date became known. I looked at Lawson's handwritten note. Completion in 6 months. GA. Must not learn revised terms. He learned them, I said. Yes. Then killed Lawson to stop the transfer. Not merely to stop it. To obtain the missing certificate. We have not found it. Nor has the murderer, perhaps. That was worth considering. If Ames already found the certificate, why leave the umbrella? If the certificate had been in the handle, the umbrella's emptiness would suggest he removed it. But the brass key was found in Lawson's study, placed there to make the umbrella appear merely a device for entry. So the key was a false explanation, an incomplete one. Wolfe gathered the documents into a neat pile. Richard Lawson's death did not arise from a sudden argument. The route was prepared months ago. The umbrella was taken and altered. The copied key was tested. The underground meetings were observed. Ames waited until the ownership transfer was ready and the future value of the property was certain. You have convicted him. No, I have identified the shape of the plan. What is missing? The certificate, the exact method of poisoning, and proof that Mr. Ames made the journey through the cellar on the night of the murder. Fritz appeared at the door and announced dinner. Wolfe rose. Tomorrow, Archie, you will learn what Gerald Ames did during the 6 months he claimed the terminal project was failing. And if he refuses to tell me, then discover what he purchased, whom he paid, and why a man expecting enormous profit required a dry umbrella during a week of rain. The property maps remained spread across the long table after we left the office. They showed warehouses, service roads, railway lines, and one narrow parcel on which millions depended. Richard Lawson had been murdered 2 days after preparing to transfer that parcel. The poisoned glass belonged to the night of his death. The plan behind it had begun months earlier. Chapter 5. The dry umbrella's secret. An umbrella is one of the few possessions a man may abandon without causing an investigation. He may leave it in a restaurant, a taxi, an office, or the front hall of a woman whose husband is expected home early, and no one assumes murder. The black umbrella beside the Hawthorne cellar door had lost that privilege. At 10:15 Saturday morning, it lay on the long table in Wolfe's office beneath a bright reading lamp. Inspector Kramer had allowed us to borrow it for 2 hours, provided a police officer remained in the front room, and I signed enough papers to suggest I intended to emigrate with it. Wolfe was upstairs with the orchids. Saul Panzer had gone to trace Gerald Ames's property purchases. I sat at the table with gloves, a magnifying glass, and the uncomfortable feeling that the umbrella had already told us everything except the part we needed. The black cloth remained spotless. The wooden handle still carried pale cellar dust in its narrow grooves. The silver collar concealed the hollow chamber where a copied key, document, or ownership certificate might once have been hidden. I opened and closed the umbrella twice. The mechanism worked smoothly, too smoothly, considering its age. The ribs had been cleaned. The runner showed a faint line of fresh oil. One tip had been replaced with a newer piece of metal, carefully blackened to match the others. I examined the strap that held the folded cloth together. Its button was black horn. The stitching near the buckle looked heavier than the rest. When I turned the strap back, a corner of white paper appeared beneath it. It was no larger than my thumbnail. I used tweezers to draw it out. The paper had been folded under the strap and sewn into place, probably by someone who assumed no detective would spend Saturday morning examining umbrella stitching. 3 faded lines were printed on it. Morgan Repairs 214, East 19th Street Order 6841. I carried the umbrella upstairs. The plant rooms were warm, bright, and humid, an improvement over the weather and most human company. Wolfe stood before a bench of orchids while Theodore Horstman examined a root. Wolfe looked at the umbrella in my gloved hand. You were told not to bring that here. I was told not to bring it before it was tested for poison. It has been tested. The plant rooms are not an evidence locker. I found a repair label. That earned me his eyes. I showed it to him. When? He asked. Hidden under the strap. The umbrella was repaired across town. Order number 6841. Go there. You do not want to discuss possibilities. No. Possibilities are what you bring back when facts are unavailable. At 11:20, I entered Morgan Repairs on East 19th Street. The shop was narrow, dark, and crowded with canes, umbrellas, leather cases, handles, buckles, and objects whose owners had believed repair cheaper than surrender. A bell rang above the door. An old man emerged from behind a curtain. He had white hair, a narrow face, and a pair of glasses so thick that his eyes appeared to have been enlarged for inspection. Umbrella? He asked. Yes. Leave it on the counter. I would rather take one with me. He looked at the black umbrella under my arm. That one has been here before. That was quicker than expected. You remember it? I remember my own work. He gave the silver collar a glance. Removable handle, waterproof joint, new tip, reinforced strap. 6841. He reached under the counter, removed a box of cards, and began searching. His fingers stopped. Here. The repair card was dated October 8, nearly 6 months before Lawson's death, and 4 days before the first recorded underground meeting. The customer's name was Walter Drake. The work order included 5 instructions: replace damaged tip, clean and oil mechanism, strengthen strap, seal handle joint against moisture, return unused and fully wrapped. I read the last line again. Return unused. The old man nodded. He made a point of it. What does unused mean in umbrella repair? It means I was not to test it in water. You normally do. For waterproofing. Yes. I opened the umbrella, spray it, check the cloth and seams. But not this one. He said the cloth must remain perfectly clean. He wanted it wrapped in paper before leaving the shop. Did he explain why? Said it was a presentation object. Was the hollow handle already there? Yes. But the chamber was loose. He asked me to improve the seal around the collar. Did he ask you to alter its size? The old man took the umbrella, unscrewed the handle, and looked inside. I fitted a narrow brass sleeve. It kept objects from rattling. What kind of objects? Rolled notes, perhaps. A small key. I did not ask. Did Drake collect it personally? Yes. When? October 11. The day before Lawson's first recorded underground meeting. Was anyone with him? The old man considered. A second man waited outside. Description: or heavy shoulders, grey coat. He came in once to ask how long it would take. Gerald Ames. I do not know names. I showed him a newspaper photograph of Ames that I had clipped before leaving the brownstone. The old man adjusted his glasses. Yes, that could be him. Could be. The photograph is poor. The man was younger than I am and larger than you. I remember that. That described Ames well enough for interest, not arrest. Did Drake pay cash? Yes. Did he return later? Once, perhaps a month afterward. He bought grey sealing compound. The same material used around the handle. Yes. How much? A small tin. For this umbrella. He did not say. I telephoned Wolfe from the shop. Walter Drake brought it for repair 6 months ago, I reported. The work was completed 1 day before Lawson's first underground meeting. Drake ordered the handle, chamber sealed, the strap reinforced, and the umbrella returned unused and wrapped. Gerald Ames may have been waiting outside. May. The shopkeeper is not positive. What did Mr. Drake tell us? That Emily Harper gave him the umbrella 5 months ago, and that it disappeared from his office 3 months ago. Wolfe grunted. The repair date proves he possessed it earlier. Yes, he lied. Enthusiastically. Bring him. Walter Drake was not in his office. His assistant said he had gone to inspect plumbing at the empty trust property beside Lawson's townhouse. I found him in the basement standing near a row of pipes with a workman. When he saw me, he dismissed the workman and asked whether I had a habit of entering private buildings without permission. I have several habits. One is finding repair labels. His face changed before he could prevent it. I held up the Morgan Repairs card. Order 6841. October 8th. Customer. Walter Drake. He said nothing. You told us Emily Harper gave you the umbrella 5 months ago. She did. You had it repaired 6 months ago. That is impossible. The man who repaired it remembers you. His records are better than your memory. Drake walked toward his office without inviting me. I followed. He closed the door and remained standing. Richard gave me the umbrella first, he said. I returned it to Miss Harper. She gave it back later. That is a complicated social life for rain equipment. It was used to carry private documents. You ordered it returned without water testing, because the cloth had to remain clean. Why? Richard wanted to know if anyone used it between meetings. That answer had merit. If the cloth became wet or stained, he would know someone had opened or carried it. Yes. Why reinforce the strap to hold it tightly closed? Why seal the hollow handle? To protect documents. Why did you deny owning it? I never owned it. Honest people can usually admit possessing an umbrella without hiring counsel. Drake sat behind his desk. I denied it because Richard's death made every object connected with the meetings dangerous. That method has worked beautifully. He looked at the repair card. What did Morgan tell you? That you bought grey sealing compound later, the same kind found around the handle and on the underground door. Drake's expression hardened. I used it to seal cracks around basement pipes and locks. You used umbrella repair compound on building locks? It was waterproof. Did you give any to Gerald Ames? No. Was Ames with you when you collected the umbrella? Drake looked toward the door. He drove me there. Why? We had a property inspection nearby. Did he know about the hollow handle? He saw Morgan unscrew it. So he did. Yes. Did Ames know the umbrella would be used in the underground meetings? Not then. When did he learn? 3 months later, when he followed Lawson into the storage room. That agreed with Emily Harper's account. I sat across from him. Tell me how the umbrella was used from October onward. Drake rubbed one thumb across the edge of his desk. Lawson did not trust ordinary envelopes. The terminal project involved confidential ownership options. He asked me to prepare a private route through the cellars and arrange a way to move small papers without carrying a document case. So, you selected the umbrella. Miss Harper's company had ordered presentation umbrellas. She gave one to Richard. He gave it to me to modify. Why an umbrella? Because during bad weather no one notices one. A porter might remember a briefcase entering a cellar. He would not remember an umbrella. Except this umbrella had to remain dry. Inside the passages, yes. It was wrapped when carried outdoors. That explained the black cloth bag. What traveled in the handle? A key to the meeting room. Lease option copies. Once, a list of investors. The missing Greybridge ownership certificate. I never saw it. Lawson considered hiding it there. He mentioned the idea. Who heard him? Bennett and Harper. And Ames. Drake hesitated. He might have heard part of the conversation when he interrupted the meeting. Did you leave the umbrella in your office afterward? Yes. Locked in the master key cabinet. Who had access? My assistant, Mrs. Calder, Harold Kent, and me. Ames visited often enough to know where the cabinet was. When did the umbrella disappear? January 17th. Not merely 3 months ago. He knew the date exactly. Why remember the day? Because Lawson requested it for a meeting. I opened the cabinet and found it gone. What did you do? I telephoned him. What did he say? He believed Ames had taken it. Why? Ames had been in my office the previous evening. He claimed he needed plans for the North River properties. Did Lawson confront him? No. He said accusing Ames without proof would reveal that we had discovered the false charges. Did you change the cellar locks? The next morning. That was the new locks. Someone tested twice. Yes. Why not block the passage completely? Lawson still needed it. Drake's story explained several things and endangered him with several others. You prepared the route, modified the umbrella, copied the key, bought the sealing compound, controlled the property, and lied about all of it. I did not kill Richard. You merely constructed the murderer's equipment for Richard. Then Ames stole it. I believe so. Belief is not recovery. I asked where he had been on the night Lawson died. He repeated that he had been home with his wife. This time I asked for details. Dinner at 7. Radio afterward. His wife went to bed at 10:30. Drake remained downstairs reading until midnight. Did your wife see you after 10:30? No. Did you leave? No. Could you have? He glared. Anyone can leave a house. That is the first broad truth you have offered. Before I left, Drake opened a lower drawer and handed me a small notebook. These are the dates Richard used the umbrella. There were 6 entries. October 12, November 3, December 18, January 9, February 14, March 2. The dates matched 6 of Lawson's underground visits. Beside 4 dates, Drake had written a single letter indicating the item carried. K for key, L for lease, I for investors, T for transfer. The final entry, March 2, was marked C. Certificate, I asked. I assumed so. Who carried the umbrella that night? Emily Harper. She had denied seeing the umbrella in the room. Another lie joined the collection. I telephoned Wolfe from Drake's office. Drake admits modifying the umbrella for Lawson's secret business. Ames saw the hollow handle and later may have stolen the umbrella from Drake's cabinet. The umbrella was used 6 times. On March 2nd, it apparently carried the Greybridge certificate. Apparently, Drake marked the entry C, but says he never saw the contents. Who carried it? Emily Harper. Bring the notebook. Speak with her. Emily Harper received me in her apartment with no coffee this time. I placed a copy of Drake's final entry on the table. March 2nd. The umbrella carried something marked C. Drake says you carried it. She looked at the paper, and then at me. I carried the umbrella from the Calder basement to the meeting room. What was inside? A sealed ownership certificate. Greybridge? Yes. Why did you deny seeing the umbrella during a meeting? Because possession of that certificate could make me appear responsible for Lawson's death. Did you receive it? No. Richard showed it to me, then replaced it in the handle. What happened afterward? Walter took the umbrella. Drake says it disappeared from his cabinet in January. Her eyes widened. That cannot be true. I carried it in March. Now we had a date problem large enough to sit on. You are certain? Yes. Same umbrella. Black cloth, wooden handle, silver collar. Did you open the handle? Richard did. What did the certificate say? It gave him 26% ownership of Greybridge properties. Enough to control the terminal, entrance, with my shares. Yes. Where did he take it after the meeting? He said he would hide it somewhere Ames would never search. Did he return it to the handle? For the moment. Who else was there? George Bennett and Walter Drake. Was Ames watching? We did not see him. I called Drake from Harper's telephone. He denied carrying the umbrella after March 2 because, according to him, it had vanished in January. When I put down the receiver, Harper said, "Walter is lying. So are you, but we will grade later." I returned to Morgan Repairs and showed the owner the March date. He checked his cards again. The umbrella had returned to his shop on March 4. This time there was no customer name. The work had been paid in cash. The instructions read: replace inner brass sleeve. Remove scratches from handle. Do not wet fabric. The customer was described in a note as tall man, grey coat. Gerald Ames was tall and had worn a grey coat during the winter. Walter Drake was also tall and owned several grey coats. The old shopkeeper remembered one more detail. The man's right hand was bandaged, he said. He caught it on a metal clasp. I had seen Gerald Ames's hands only once, at Lawson's townhouse. There had been a pale scar across his right palm. By the time I reached West 35th Street, Saul Panzer was waiting in the office. Wolfe had finished his afternoon hours with the orchids and was opening his second bottle of beer. I gave him the repair history, Drake's admissions, Harper's contradiction, and the second anonymous repair. Saul supplied another fact. Gerald Ames had been treated on March 3 for a deep cut across his right palm. He claimed it came from broken glass. Wolfe leaned back. The inner sleeve was replaced the following day, he said, because Ames forced open the handle and cut himself on it. Likely. He removed the Greybridge certificate. Possibly. You have returned to possibilities. Because the certificate remains missing. Saul placed a property record on the desk. 2 weeks after the March meeting, one of Ames's hidden companies used the Greybridge certificate number as security for a private loan. That removed most of the possibility, I said. Ames stole the umbrella from the meeting room, cut his hand opening the handle, removed the certificate, and had the damage repaired. Wolfe nodded. Then he returned the umbrella to Drake's cabinet, or otherwise placed it where Lawson's group could continue using it. Mr. Drake believed it had vanished in January because dates have been altered in his notebook. By Drake, or by someone who obtained it. I examined the entries. The January date had been written in darker ink. Under the 5, a faint curve suggested the original digit had been a 3. January 17 may once have been March 17. Someone changed the disappearance date to make it seem the umbrella was stolen before it carried the certificate, I said. Yes. Drake kept the notebook. He also lied about the repair and ownership. His hands are not clean. Do you think he helped Ames? I think he prepared an instrument for lawful secrecy, lost control of it, and concealed his negligence. Whether he later assisted the murderer remains open. Wolfe looked at the umbrella. The instruction that it remain unused was not eccentric. Its spotless condition served as a seal. If it returned wet or dirty, Lawson would know someone had carried it outside the protected route. But the murderer preserved it too, because he intended it to support a false account. A dry umbrella beside a rain-soaked cellar door suggested it had just emerged from the building. It was meant to direct attention toward the Hawthorne passage, and away from Lawson's own cellar. Yes, Wolfe tapped the repair card. More important, the umbrella was prepared before the secret meetings began. Its hollow chamber, reinforced strap, waterproof joint, and spotless fabric were part of a system constructed months in advance. Lawson's system, at first, and later Ames's murder plan, perhaps with assistance. The telephone rang. It was Kramer. The laboratory had identified the poison in Lawson's glass. It was digitalis, concentrated enough to stop a vulnerable heart. Lawson did not take digitalis medication, but someone close to the property scheme had recently purchased it through a private clinic. Kramer would not give me the name over the telephone. Wolfe listened to my half of the conversation and closed his eyes. The umbrella has now served 3 purposes, he said. It transported documents, concealed a copied key, and manufactured a false route for the murderer. All while staying dry, because its condition was part of the deception. Then Walter Drake's denial exposed more than ownership. Yes, he knew the umbrella was not ordinary. Honest men admit owning umbrellas because umbrellas are harmless. Mr. Drake knew this one was not. Fritz appeared at the door and announced dinner. Wolfe rose. Tomorrow, Archie, you will learn who purchased the digitalis and who altered Drake's notebook. And if both answers point to Gerald Ames, then we shall still need to prove who crossed the passage on the night Lawson died. He went toward the dining room. The repaired umbrella remained on the long table beneath the lamp. 6 months earlier, a man had ordered that it be cleaned, sealed, reinforced, wrapped, and kept from rain. It had been preserved not because it was valuable, but because its untouched condition would one day support a lie. Someone had planned that lie long before Richard Lawson drank the poison. Chapter 6. The missing agreement. Saul Panzer brought the missing agreement to the brownstone on Monday morning, though he did not bring the paper itself. That distinction mattered to Inspector Kramer, who preferred evidence he could put in an envelope, number, and lose temporarily in a police office. It mattered less to Nero Wolfe. Saul arrived at 10:30 with a folder under his arm. I was at my desk comparing Walter Drake's altered notebook with the umbrella repair records. Wolfe was upstairs with the orchids, where no agreement, missing or otherwise, could interrupt him before 11. Saul took the yellow chair. The North River Agreement had 2 versions, he said. One legal, and one profitable, one signed by Lawson and his investors. The other was prepared for filing after ownership transferred. I put down the notebook. Who prepared the second? A law clerk working through Greybridge Properties. He believed the revisions came from Lawson. They did not. They came from Walter Drake's office. That was worth waiting for Wolfe. At 11, the elevator hummed. Wolfe entered, crossed to his desk, and settled into his chair. He looked at Saul. Proceed. Saul opened the folder. The North River Commercial Terminal required control of Greybridge Properties, including the narrow parcel that would provide the terminal's service entrance. Lawson intended to transfer the controlling certificate into a new company financed by Emily Harper. The genuine agreement gave Harper voting control, Lawson final authority over major sales, and Walter Drake a 5-year property management contract. The altered version changed 3 clauses. Drake's management company would control all maintenance, leasing, security, and construction payments. A second company would receive consulting fees equal to 12% of the project's value. A third clause allowed those fees to be transferred to outside accounts without further approval. Who owned the consulting company? I asked. Saul turned a page. Harbour Management Services. Officially, 2 clerks and a retired builder. Actually, Drake controlled it through an investment trust. How much would 12% bring him? Between $2 and $3 million at the initial valuation. More if the terminal expanded. Wolfe's lips pushed forward. And the false accounts? 6. Drake opened them over the past year. Some were in the names of maintenance suppliers that did not exist. Others belonged to companies that had stopped operating. I said, Gerald Ames was stealing management fees too. Ames was taking money from Lawson's warehouse companies, Saul replied. But Drake built the larger structure. Ames's charges may have helped conceal it. Did Ames know? Not all of it. He knew the property would become valuable and bought nearby options. He may have stolen the Greybridge certificate for leverage. But the altered final agreement would have placed the whole development under Drake's control. Wolfe said, Where did you find the second version? A title examiner kept a photographic copy. Drake delivered it 6 weeks ago and asked whether it could be filed automatically after the ownership transfer. The examiner noticed that 2 signatures appeared copied rather than original and refused. Did he inform Lawson? He telephoned Lawson's office. Clara Wynne took the message. I reached for the telephone. Clara Wynne answered on the second ring. When I mentioned the title examiner, she became quiet. Yes, she said. He warned us. When? 5 weeks before Richard died. What did Lawson do? He compared the agreement with his copy and discovered 3 pages had been replaced. Who had handled it? Walter, Drake, George Bennett, Richard, and me. Did he accuse Drake? Not publicly, privately. She hesitated. I heard them in Richard's office 2 weeks later. Mr. Drake said the changes were ordinary management protections. Richard called them theft. How did Drake respond? He laughed. He said Richard was tired and had misunderstood. No threats, then I heard. Did they continue working together? Yes, Richard said. Exposing him too early would frighten the others involved. When I put down the receiver, Wolfe said, the lack of a public quarrel was deliberate. Lawson wanted proof, I said, and Drake wanted him unworried. Saul added another document to the table. A bank clerk remembered Drake asking how quickly consulting payments could be released after the ownership certificate was filed. The question came 4 months before Lawson's death. The plan was not born during the week of rain. It had been growing since the underground meetings began. Wolfe instructed me to bring Drake. He came at 12:40, wearing a charcoal suit, and the expression of a man who had already prepared answers to the wrong questions. He sat in the red leather chair. Wolfe placed copies of the 2 agreements before him. You prepared the second version. Drake looked at the pages without touching them. I forwarded revisions supplied by Mr. Lawson. No, the title examiner retained your letter of instruction. The changes originated in your office. They were proposed changes. They were fraudulent changes. They diverted millions to companies you controlled. Drake looked at Saul. Where did you get these? Wolfe's brows rose. Your concern for the source exceeds your concern for the accusation. I was to receive management compensation. That was never secret. Harbor Management Services was secret. Drake's jaw tightened. I held an indirect interest. You held all effective control. Richard knew. He discovered it 5 weeks before his death. Drake leaned back. If he believed I had committed fraud, why did he keep me employed? To observe you while he recovered evidence. That is speculation. Wolfe tapped the genuine agreement. Mr. Lawson prepared to transfer control to Miss Harper. Your false agreement would replace it after filing. He found the substituted pages and threatened exposure. He threatened everyone. Not with equal cause. Drake looked toward me. You think I killed him because of a contract? People have killed over less attractive paper, I said. Wolfe said, you arranged the underground route. You controlled the keys. You modified the umbrella. You purchased the ceiling compound. You possessed the building plans. You knew where Lawson met his accountant and investors. You also lied repeatedly about your possession of the umbrella. I explained that. You revised your lies. That is not the same. Drake rose. I will not remain here to be insulted. Wolfe's voice stopped him before he reached the door. The umbrella was found beside the lower hinge of the Hawthorne cellar door. Drake turned. That is where Harold Kent found it. No, Mr. Kent said. It stood beside the door. The exact position was not published and was not mentioned to you. Drake's face remained still, but not naturally. Wolfe continued. The repair compound found beneath the handle also appeared on the lower hinge. Why? I used the compound in several cellar repairs. Then you will not object when Mr. Goodwin examines that hinge more carefully. Drake held Wolfe's eyes. There is nothing there. It was a simple sentence and a serious mistake, Wolfe said. How do you know? Drake left without answering. As soon as the door closed, Wolfe looked at me. You will go to the Hawthorne. With Kramer, without delay. Take Saul. Inform Mr. Kramer while traveling. Kramer arrived at the Hawthorne cellar 5 minutes after we did, and complained that I had begun without him, though I had not yet touched the door. Harold Kent brought stronger lamps. Samuel Pike stood near the boiler room, watching us with the interest of a man glad someone else was in trouble. The lower hinge was thick iron set into a stone frame. A bright scratch marked its outer edge. Grey ceiling compound filled a narrow line where the hinge plate met the stone. I scraped away the compound. Behind it was the outline of a metal cover. Kramer bent closer. That is not part of the hinge. No. 4 small screws held the plate. Their heads had been painted to match the iron. Saul removed them with a narrow driver. The plate came free. Inside the stone was a shallow compartment. It contained a rolled document wrapped in waxed cloth and a small glass tube with a metal cap. Kramer put on gloves. The document was the signed original of the North River ownership agreement. Attached to it was a handwritten statement from Richard Lawson. I read over Kramer's shoulder. If this agreement is found outside my possession, Walter Drake has attempted to replace or destroy it. The controlling certificate remains secured separately. George Bennett holds the financial comparison. Clara Wynne knows the dates of substitution. Below the statement was Lawson's signature and the date, 6 days before his death. The glass tube held white crystals. Kramer looked at me. Poison, or sugar for a very small cup of coffee. He sent it to the laboratory. Saul examined the compartment. A narrow circular mark inside matched the metal tip of the umbrella. The umbrella stood here as a marker, he said. I looked at the cellar door as it would have appeared from the yard. The umbrella's curved handle had been turned toward the hinge. Its metal tip had rested in a shallow chip in the paving stone directly below the concealed plate. It had pointed to the compartment. Wolfe had been right. Its location mattered more than ownership. But the placement raised another question. If the killer knew the agreement was hidden behind the hinge, why leave the umbrella pointing to it? Kramer voiced it less politely. Drake hid the paper and then marked it for us. Maybe he did not hide it, I said. Lawson could have placed the agreement there as insurance. The umbrella may have served as a signal, telling someone that the compartment had been used, Kramer said. Then the killer moved the umbrella after taking something from the handle and accidentally left it pointing at the agreement. Accidents are getting crowded. We examined the waxed wrapping. One corner carried a reddish smear. The umbrella handle had held reddish brick dust beneath the pale plaster. Someone had opened the compartment while standing in the passage, then resealed it with the same compound used on the umbrella collar. Saul found a partial print on the inner metal plate. It was too blurred for identification, but the ridge direction suggested a right thumb dragged across the surface. Gerald Ames had injured his right hand in March. Walter Drake used his right hand for keys and tools. We still had 2 candidates and 1 compartment. The laboratory telephoned 2 hours later. The glass tube contained concentrated digitalis. That brought Kramer to the brownstone with the agreement, the tube, and a mood capable of damaging furniture. Wolfe sat behind his desk, while Kramer laid the evidence before him. You knew it was there, Kramer said. No, you sent Goodwin directly to it. I sent him to examine a location Mr. Drake claimed contained nothing. Kramer pointed at the tube, digitalis, the same substance found in Lawson's glass. Indeed. Then Drake stored the poison beside the agreement, or Lawson stored the agreement beside poison planted by Drake. Kramer's face reddened. Why would Lawson hide poison? He would not. Then arrest Drake. On what evidence? His connection to the compartment is persuasive, not conclusive. He built and maintained the passage. His fingerprints might be expected on the hinge. He purchased the compound. He prepared the umbrella. He could claim the poison was placed by Ames. Kramer took out his cigar and forgot to light it. Ames had the certificate. Probably. Ames profited from the property. Yes, Ames cut his hand opening the umbrella. Likely. Then which one killed Lawson? Wolfe looked at the recovered agreement. Mr. Ames sought control of the property entrance. Mr. Drake sought control of every dollar that would pass through it. Their schemes overlapped, but they were not identical. I said Lawson discovered both. Yes. The secret meetings began as an investigation into Ames's false charges. During that investigation, Lawson discovered Drake's substituted agreement. Drake had arranged the room, the passage, the keys, and the method of carrying documents. He saw every step Lawson took against him, and quietly prepared the murder, Kramer said. Wolfe nodded once. The umbrella was part of Lawson's security system. Drake transformed it into part of his plan. He knew its untouched condition would support a false route. He knew the hollow handle could carry a key or poison. He knew the hidden compartment behind the hinge. Then why was the agreement still there? I asked. Because he could not retrieve it. The same reason he left the umbrella, possibly. Or he searched the wrong compartment in Lawson's study, believing the agreement had been moved. Wolfe picked up Lawson's statement. This paper proves motive and attempted fraud. The poison proves preparation, but neither proves that Drake entered Lawson's study on the fatal night. Kramer said, "You want another miracle." "No, I want the route." Wolfe looked at me. The umbrella's final position marked the hidden compartment. It may also record the direction from which the carrier approached. How? The handle was clean on one side and dusty on the other. The cellar door opens inward. Reconstruct the movement. Determine whether the umbrella was placed by someone emerging from the hawthorn, entering it, or returning through Lawson's passage. That sounds like geometry. It is observation. Do not insult it. Fritz entered to announce dinner. Wolfe rose. The missing agreement reveals why Mr. Drake feared Lawson. The digitalis proves that the murder was prepared before the night it occurred. The false accounts show what he expected to gain. But you are not ready to accuse him. not publicly. What is missing? Wolfe looked at the dry black umbrella under the office lamp. The final journey. Once we know who placed it beside the door, we shall know who carried the poison through the cellar. He went toward the dining room. The signed agreement remained on the long table, rescued from a compartment behind a rusty hinge. It exposed Walter Drake's fraud and placed the murder weapon inside the route he had designed. For months, Drake had acted as Lawson's helpful property manager, arranging keys, rooms, repairs, and secret meetings. All the while, he had been building a path that could lead a murderer into Lawson's study without crossing a public street. The umbrella had marked that path. Now we had to prove who walked it. Chapter 7. Why the umbrella was there. Nero Wolfe does not pace when thinking. That would require movement and suggest uncertainty, two conditions he regards as offensive. He sits. On Tuesday morning he sat behind his desk with his eyes closed, his fingers resting on the arms of his chair, while I stood beside the long table opening and closing a black umbrella, like a salesman with poor timing. Inspector Kramer watched from the red leather chair. Saul Panzer occupied the yellow one. On the table lay the recovered North River agreement, photographs of the cellar door, Walter Drake's altered notebook, the repair shop records, and the laboratory report identifying digitotalis in both Lawson's drinking glass and the tube hidden behind the hinge. I placed the umbrella beside the photograph of the cellar entrance. The handle faced left, I said. The metal tip rested directly below the concealed compartment. The door opens inward. Wolfe did not move. Kramer said, "We have been through that. We have been near it. That is different." I demonstrated the route again. A person leaving the underground passage would push the cellar door outward into the yard, step through, turn, and close it. To place the umbrella, as it had been found, with the curved handle toward the hinge, the carrier would have to turn back toward the building. A person approaching from the yard would naturally leave it with the handle toward the steps. Kramer looked at the photographs. So it was placed by someone coming out of the cellar. Yes, that proves the killer used the passage. It proves the person carrying the umbrella emerged through the Hawthorne cellar. It does not prove when. Wolfe opened his eyes. "It was not carried out after the murder," he said. Kramer frowned. "You told us it marked the murderer's route." "It did, but not in the way we assumed." Wolfe pointed toward the metal tip. The umbrella's final position was deliberate. The tip indicated the concealed compartment behind the hinge. "Mr. Lawson created that arrangement." I stared at him. "Lawson placed it there?" "Not on the fatal night. He established the signal months earlier." Saul leaned forward. Wolfe continued. "The underground meetings were conducted in secrecy. Participants entered through different buildings. Telephone calls and written invitations were avoided because Lawson believed his office was watched. A simple signal was required to announce that a meeting would occur." "The umbrella," I said. "Yes." Kramer removed his cigar from his mouth. "Standing beside the cellar door?" "Whenever it appeared there, the participants knew the underground room would be open that evening." That explained the repair order better than any theory we had produced. The umbrella had been cleaned, sealed, and kept unused because its appearance needed to remain constant. A wet or damaged umbrella might look accidental. A spotless black umbrella in the same precise location was recognizable. I opened Drake's notebook. The 6 dates marked here were not only dates when documents traveled in the handle, they were meeting dates. "Precisely," Wolfe said. "The letters K, L, I, T, and C recorded what the umbrella carried, but the object itself announced the meeting." Kramer said, "Why use it during rain?" "Because rain made an umbrella ordinary. Tenants and employees might notice it, but would not question it immediately. The participants knew that a dry umbrella beside the door was not abandoned. It was an invitation." I looked at the first repair instruction. "Return unused and fully wrapped." Lawson wanted it dry so the signal could not be mistaken for lost property. Yes, and Drake arranged the system. He selected the position, prepared the hollow handle, copied the keys, and maintained the passage. He alone understood every part of it. Kramer tapped the poison report. That still does not put digitalis in Lawson. No, the meeting does. Wolfe turned to Saul. Mr. Panzer? Saul opened a folder. The final pieces had come from interviews with the night employees and a search of Drake's property office. Harold Kent remembered seeing the umbrella beside the cellar door on 4 previous occasions. Each time, Walter Drake had visited the Hawthorne basement later that evening. Samuel Pike remembered that Drake always removed the umbrella before dawn. Emily Harper confirmed that the underground group understood the signal. She had denied it, because admitting knowledge of the system would connect her to confidential property negotiations. George Bennett confirmed the same. On the night before Lawson was poisoned, the umbrella appeared at 7:40. Lawson entered through his own cellar at 8:20. Bennett and Harper had both received no invitation and did not attend. Only Drake knew a meeting had been announced, Kramer said. Did anyone see him? A Calder building janitor saw Drake enter the basement at 8:35, Saul replied. Drake said he was inspecting a heating leak. Was there one? No. Wolfe placed his palms on his desk. Mr. Drake arranged a private meeting with Lawson by using a signal Lawson trusted. Lawson entered the underground room carrying the revised agreement and expecting a discussion concerning the transfer. With Drake, I said. Yes. What happened in the room? Mr. Drake offered him whiskey. Kramer looked toward the laboratory report. The poisoned glass in the study contained mineral water. Wolfe nodded. The underground glass was washed, but the digitalis did not vanish from Lawson's mouth. The poison was concentrated in a small measure of whiskey. Its bitterness was partly concealed by the liquor. Lawson later returned to his study, experienced thirst and numbness, and drank mineral water. Residue transferred from his lips to the rim and into the water. The laboratory can prove that, Kramer asked. It can establish that the concentration in the study glass was too low to represent the original dose. Dr. Ellis confirmed it this morning. Lawson consumed the lethal amount elsewhere. That solved a difficulty I had not liked admitting. Why hide the remaining digitalis behind the hinge? I asked. Drake did not intend to leave it there permanently. The concealed compartment had been used for documents and small objects between meetings. He placed the tube there before the murder, so he would not carry poison through the public parts of the building. Then retrieved it during the meeting. He removed enough to prepare the whiskey. After Lawson drank, Drake returned the tube to the compartment. He expected to recover it when he removed the umbrella and cleared the signal. Kramer said, but the tube remained, because he was interrupted. Wolfe looked at Saul again. A second witness had finally been found. At 9:20 that night, a delivery driver entered the Hawthorne service yard to shelter from the rain while repairing a loose chain on his truck. He remained there almost 20 minutes. At 9:38, 2 kitchen employees crossed the yard carrying supplies. At 10, Samuel Pike descended to check the furnace. The activity prevented Drake from leaving by the Hawthorne door and removing the umbrella. He returned through the Calder building, Wolfe said. Lawson returned to his townhouse by his own passage. Drake intended to come back after the yard cleared, remove the signal, recover the poison, and destroy the hidden agreement if Lawson had replaced it there. But he did not, Kramer said. The rain increased. Employees continued moving through the service area. By dawn, Harold Kent's furnace man had discovered the umbrella and carried it inside, I said. Drake lost the chance to recover it. Yes. Once employees began asking about it, retrieving it would connect him to the passage. Kramer frowned. Why did Lawson leave the original agreement behind the hinge before meeting Drake? Insurance. He suspected Drake had altered the contract. He placed the signed original in the compartment and positioned the umbrella to indicate its location if he failed to retrieve it. So they both used the umbrella, I said. Lawson used it to announce the meeting and mark his protection. Drake used the familiar signal to lure him below. That was the heart of it. The object had not acquired one meaning. It had carried several meanings between men who no longer trusted each other. To Bennett and Harper, it announced a meeting. To Lawson, its position marked where he had hidden the genuine agreement. To Drake, it offered a way to summon Lawson without a letter or call. After the murder, it became evidence because Drake could not remove it. Kramer stood. We have motive, access, poison connected to Drake's system, and a witness who puts him in the colder basement. We also have his false agreement, I added. And his lies about the umbrella, Saul said. Kramer looked at Wolfe. Enough for inquiry, certainly. For conviction, possibly not. Kramer's face tightened. What else do you want? Proof that Mr. Drake knew Lawson drank the whiskey underground. Bennett and Harper were not there. Precisely. There was no witness. Then how do you expect proof? Wolfe's eyes moved toward me. Mr. Drake will provide it, I said. Voluntarily? Not knowingly. Wolfe instructed me to telephone Drake and tell him that a second glass had been recovered from the underground room. The glass, I was to say, carried a clear thumbprint and enough digitalis to identify the vessel used for poisoning. There is no second glass, Kramer said. There were 2 glasses on the shelf. Both had been washed. The prints were useless. Mr. Drake does not know that. Kramer objected on professional grounds for nearly a minute, which was impressive because his professional grounds usually welcomed traps. I called Drake's office, he answered himself. Mr. Wolfe has completed his examination of the cellar evidence, I said. A second whiskey glass was recovered. Inspector Kramer will compare its print with this afternoon. Silence followed. Then Drake said, that glass was not on the table. I glanced at Wolfe. Which glass? The one used that night. It was washed and returned to the shelf. He stopped. There are moments when a telephone line seems to become visible. I could almost see him standing at the other end, realizing he had stepped through a door and locked it behind him. I said, you sound certain. I attended meetings in that room. I know how glasses were stored. But you denied attending Lawson's final meeting. He ended the call. Kramer reached for his hat. Now, not yet, Wolfe said. Kramer stared at him. He just admitted knowledge only the killer had. He will claim deduction or confusion. Bring him here tonight with the others. I prefer a complete account before witnesses. You prefer a performance. I prefer efficiency. Kramer disliked it but agreed because he wanted Drake seated in a room with no convenient cellar door. I telephoned George Bennett, Walter Drake, Emily Harper, Gerald Ames, Clara Wynne, Harold Kent, and Samuel Pike. Miss Lawson's housekeeper, Martha Cole, was also invited because she had found the body and could establish the condition of the study. Kramer and Pearlie would attend. Saul would wait in the front room. When the final call was made, Wolfe examined the umbrella once more. The repair shop owner, said Drake, demanded that it remain unused. I said, that was not because he planned the murder then. No. At first, he prepared it for Lawson's meetings. When did the plan change? When Lawson discovered the substituted agreement, Drake already possessed the route, the signals and knowledge of Lawson's habits. He did not invent a new method. He corrupted an existing one. That is why the crime was months in preparation, even if the decision to kill came later. Yes, the path had been built for secrecy. Drake merely changed its destination. Outside, the rain returned in a soft, steady fall. Fritz entered to ask whether Wolfe wished dinner served at the usual hour, despite the evening gathering. Wolfe assured him that murderers did not control his meals. At 7, the black umbrella stood in the office beside the long table. Wolfe had instructed me to place it exactly as it had appeared near the Hawthorne's cellar door, handle turned toward the hidden hinge, and metal tip pointing to the recovered agreement. It no longer looked forgotten. It looked like an invitation. Months earlier, Walter Drake had taught Richard Lawson to trust that signal. On the fatal night, he used it to draw him underground, poured poison into a glass, and returned to the surface, believing the rain would erase the path. He had overlooked one difficulty. The umbrella stayed dry. Chapter 8. Wolfe explains everything. At 9 o'clock that evening, Wolfe's office contained 10 people, 1 umbrella, and enough distrust to supply a political convention. Walter Drake sat in the red leather chair. He had selected it before anyone could offer him another, perhaps because it placed him directly in front of Wolfe and allowed him to appear unafraid. His face was composed, but his right thumb moved slowly against the edge of his forefinger. George Bennet sat near the bookshelves with his hands folded over his stomach. Emily Harper occupied the chair beside him, elegant and pale. Gerald Ames stood near the globe, broad-shouldered and angry at having been summoned. Clara Wynne sat beside my desk. Harold Kent and Samuel Pike had been given chairs near the door. Inspector Kramer stood to Wolfe's right, with Pearlie Stebbins behind him. Saul Parr waited in the front room, out of sight, but not out of hearing. The black umbrella stood beside the office door. I had positioned it exactly as it had appeared beside the Hawthorne cellar entrance. Its wooden handle curved toward the wall. Its metal tip pointed toward a photograph of the hidden compartment behind the lower hinge. Wolfe entered at 9:03, having delayed long enough to make everyone aware that his schedule, not murder, governed the house. He crossed to his desk, sat, and surveyed the room. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "are all present?" "Yes." "Then we may begin." Gerald Ames spoke first. "I was told this concerned Richard Lawson's murder." "It does," Wolfe said. "Then why am I here?" "The police know where I was that night. They also know that you stole a Greybridge ownership certificate, manipulated warehouse charges, and purchased property with confidential information." Ames's face reddened. "That is a lie. It is several lies, all yours, but none concerns the murder directly. Sit down." Ames remained standing, but he stopped talking. Wolfe placed both hands on the arms of his chair. Richard Lawson's death appeared at first to be a natural failure of the heart. That appearance was intentional. The poison used was digitalis, administered in a quantity sufficient to cause weakness, irregular heartbeat, confusion, and death after a delay. Kramer watched Drake. Drake watched Wolfe. "The first assumption," Wolfe continued, "was that the poison had been placed in the mineral water found beside Lawson's body. That assumption was wrong. The concentration in the glass was too slight. The digitalis reached the water from residue on Lawson's lips after he returned to his study." Emily Harper said. "Returned from where?" "The underground storage room beneath the Hawthorne residence." No one moved. Wolfe turned his head toward the umbrella. "That object led us there. But the umbrella was never important, because it was an umbrella. Its value lay in what it meant." Harold Kent shifted in his chair. "For months," Wolfe said, "the umbrella served as a silent signal. When it stood beside the Hawthorne cellar door, selected participants knew a meeting would take place in the underground room." George Bennet removed his spectacles and began polishing them. Wolfe looked at him. "You attended 4 such meetings?" Bennet nodded. "Yes." "Miss Harper attended others?" "Yes," she said. Mr. Drake arranged the passage, prepared the room, copied the necessary keys, and created the signal. Drake spoke calmly. "At Lawson's request." "At first, yes." That answer caused him to blink. Wolfe continued. "The system avoided telephone calls, letters, and appointments that could be recorded. Bad weather offered additional concealment. People carrying umbrellas attracted no attention. But this particular umbrella had to remain dry and spotless because its condition proved it was not an ordinary object abandoned by a tenant." I looked toward the black cloth. Under the office lights, it still appeared almost new. Wolfe said, "Mr. Drake took it to Morgan Repairs 6 months ago. He ordered the mechanism cleaned, the strap reinforced, the hollow handle sealed, and the fabric returned unused. He later denied possessing it." Drake said, "I explained that. You supplied several explanations. They did not agree. The umbrella belonged to Lawson. Ownership is irrelevant. You prepared it, controlled it, and understood its uses." Wolfe lifted the repair card from his desk. The hollow handle carried keys and documents. The umbrella itself of announced meetings, its precise position beside the door, carried a third meaning. Its tip pointed toward a concealed compartment behind the lower hinge. Clara Wynne looked at the photograph of the compartment. That was where Richard hid the agreement. Yes, placed the recovered North River agreement on the desk. Mr. Lawson discovered that pages in the commercial property contract had been replaced. The false version would have diverted millions of dollars through management companies and consulting accounts controlled by Walter Drake. Drake's right thumb stopped moving. Wolfe continued. The North River commercial terminal was expected to increase greatly in value when the city approved its transportation connection. Mr. Drake knew this months before the information became public. He altered the agreement so that his companies would control leasing, maintenance, security, construction payments, and consulting fees. That was a proposed management structure, Drake said. It was theft hidden inside legal language. Drake looked toward Kramer. If Lawson believed that, he could have dismissed me. He intended to do more. He intended to expose you. Wolfe tapped Lawson's handwritten statement attached to the agreement. Lawson named you. He stated that if the genuine agreement was found outside his possession, you had attempted to replace or destroy it. Drake's face tightened. Gerald Ames gave a short laugh. So the respectable property manager was stealing more than anyone. Wolfe's eyes moved to him. You stole separately, Mr. Ames. You inflated warehouse expenses, purchased nearby property with confidential knowledge, and removed the Grey Bridge certificate from the umbrella. Your conduct complicated this investigation, but you did not poison Lawson. Ames lowered himself into a chair. Wolfe returned to Drake. Lawson had been watching you for weeks. He concealed the signed agreement behind the cellar door hinge. He allowed you to believe the final transfer papers remained in his study. He also arranged to meet his accountant, Miss Harper, and others underground, so that he could gather proof without alerting you. Drake said, I attended those meetings openly. You attended some openly. You observed others secretly. You had designed the route, and no one could use it without passing through arrangements you controlled. Wolfe leaned back. When Lawson was ready to act, you faced ruin. The false agreement would be discovered. Your hidden companies would be traced. The North River project would pass to Miss Harper, and your expected millions would vanish. Emily Harper looked at Drake. You knew Richard was transferring control to me. Drake did not answer. Wolfe said. Mr. Drake did more than know. He prepared to prevent it. Kramer took his cigar from his mouth. Tell them about the poison. Wolfe nodded. A company controlled by Mr. Drake purchased concentrated digitalis under the excuse that it was required for pest experiments at storage properties. A small quantity was placed in a glass tube and hidden in the same compartment as the agreement. Drake said, anyone could have placed it there. Not anyone. The compartment was concealed behind a plate disguised as part of the hinge. You installed the plate. You purchased the sealing compound used around it. You told Mr. Goodwin there was nothing behind the hinge before anyone had opened it. Drake's mouth opened, then closed. Wolfe continued. On the night before Lawson was found dead, you placed the umbrella beside the cellar door at 7:40. Lawson saw the familiar signal and entered the underground room through his townhouse passage. He believed you had called another private business meeting. I was at home that evening. A janitor saw you enter the Calder building basement at 8:35. He is mistaken. You yourself supplied stronger evidence. Drake looked at me, I said. The telephone call. Wolfe nodded. Mr. Goodwin informed you that a whiskey glass from the meeting room had been recovered with your print and traces of digitalis. There was no usable print. There was no poison remaining in either washed glass. Kramer permitted himself half a smile. But you replied, Wolfe said, that glass was not on the table. It was washed and returned to the shelf. Drake's face went grey. You knew the fatal glass had been washed because you washed it. I knew how the room was kept. No, You knew which glass had been used that night. Drake stood. Pearlie moved closer to the door. Wolfe's voice remained calm. You met Lawson underground. You offered him whiskey. You had placed digitalis in his drink. The liquor concealed enough of its bitterness for him to swallow it. I did not. After he drank, you argued about the agreement. Lawson refused to reveal where he had hidden it. He left the room and returned to his study. The first symptoms appeared later. He drank mineral water, transferring traces of the poison from his mouth to the glass. He collapsed behind his desk, creating the appearance of heart failure. Drake looked at Kramer. This is a story. It is a reconstruction supported by your records, your purchases, your lies, and your knowledge. Wolfe pointed toward the umbrella. You intended to return after Lawson left, remove the umbrella, recover the poison tube, and search the hinge compartment. But unexpected activity in the service yard prevented you. Harold Kent said. The delivery driver. Yes. A driver remained in the yard repairing a truck chain. Kitchen workers crossed the area. Samuel Pike went down to inspect the furnace. Pike nodded slowly. Wolfe continued. You retreated through the colder passage. You expected to return later. By dawn, however, the umbrella had been discovered. Once employees began questioning its ownership, retrieving it would have linked you to the cellar route. Drake's hands had closed into fists. Wolfe said. You therefore denied ever possessing it. You concealed the repair record. You altered the date in your notebook to suggest the umbrella had disappeared before it carried the Greybridge certificate. You hoped attention would settle upon Mr. Ames. Ames turned toward Drake. You used my theft to cover yours. It required little effort, Wolfe said. Mr. Ames had already provided abundant suspicion. Drake took a step toward Wolfe's desk. You cannot prove Lawson drank whiskey with me. Wolfe picked up a small evidence envelope. Mr. Panzer. Saul entered from the front room. He placed a narrow account book on the desk. This is the Calder janitor's supply ledger, Wolfe said. On the morning after Lawson's death, 1 bottle of whiskey was missing from a locked basement cabinet. The janitor had seen you borrow the cabinet key before, claiming you needed cleaning alcohol. That proves nothing. The remaining bottles were ordinary blended whiskey. The bottle recovered yesterday from your office cabinet came from the same marked case. It carried Lawson's fingerprint beneath yours. Drake stared at the account book. Saul said, the bottle was hidden behind lease files. The room became silent. Wolfe said Lawson handled that bottle during the underground meeting. You removed it afterward and kept it because discarding it outside the building during the storm risked being seen. Later you carried it to your office and forgot it. I did not forget it. The words came out before Drake could stop them. Kramer moved forward. Drake looked from Kramer to Wolfe, then toward the umbrella. It was not supposed to remain there, he said. No one spoke. Drake's voice lowered. I went back at midnight. The yard was still occupied. Kent was speaking with the night doorman. I could not reach the door without being seen. Kramer said, you poisoned Lawson. Drake closed his eyes. He had taken everything. The management contract, the terminal, the accounts. He intended to hand it all to Harper and call me a thief. You were a thief, Emily Harper said. Drake looked at her. I built those properties. Lawson signed papers and collected profits. I created the routes, the leases, the companies, the arrangements that made the project possible. So you changed the agreement, Kramer said. Yes. And when Lawson discovered it, I tried to reason with him. With digitalis, Drake's shoulders sagged. He would not listen. He said he would expose me the next morning. I knew the underground meeting would leave no record. I knew the poison would act slowly. Kramer stepped behind him. Where are the missing false contract pages? In the furnace room of the empty trust property, inside a pipe casing. And the financial account records? My office safe. Kramer took out the handcuffs. Drake offered no resistance. As Pearlie led him toward the hall, Drake stopped beside the umbrella. For 6 months, no one questioned it. Wolfe said, because for 6 months it served an innocent purpose. Drake looked back at him. It was never innocent. No object is guilty, Mr. Drake. Men supply meaning. Kramer took Drake into custody. The others departed in stages. Gerald Ames left with Saul and a police officer because his own financial behavior still required explanation. George Bennett promised cooperation. Emily Harper took a copy of the genuine agreement. Clara Wynne remained long enough to ask whether Lawsons had suffered. Wolfe answered honestly, yes, but not for long. Harold Kent and Samuel Pike left together. Kent paused at the door and looked at the umbrella. I should have thrown it away. No, Wolfe said. Then the murderer might have succeeded. When the house was quiet, Fritz entered with beer for Wolfe and coffee for me. He examined the umbrella, but did not ask about it. Fritz respects evidence, but does not permit it to interfere with the household. Leaned back in my chair. All that trouble over one umbrella. Wolfe closed his eyes. No, Archie. The trouble came from a man who believed a signal could remain invisible forever. I looked at the black umbrella resting near the office door. For months it had stood beside a cellar entrance to call honest people, dishonest people, and frightened people into a room beneath the city. On the final night, it had invited Richard Lawson to his death. Walter Drake had believed that once the umbrella was removed, the meeting would disappear with it. The rain had prevented him from removing it. The dry umbrella had stood quietly beside the cellar door, but in the end it pointed directly at a murderer.